The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm Shannon Penrod and I'm here with Dr. Doreen herself, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Good morning, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Good morning, Shannon, and good morning, everyone. Lovely to be back.
Yes, good morning to everyone. We're live right now. It is the 1st of February, 2022. We are live right now on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, about 12 other places. We are also going to be available as a podcast later on, a free download of a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are the #1 rated autism podcast worldwide for the 2nd year in a row. Very proud of that, but that's really thanks to all of you. So we hope that you'll write in, call in. We're going to make that possible very soon for you to call in. I don't know why I just said that because I'm living in the future. But anyway, write in right now on any of the platforms that you're watching. Hola, buenos dias. And we're saying hello to Amanda with her blue hearts. So thrilled to have you here. I was following a chat that you were on last night, Amanda, that we may bring up with Dr. Granpeesheh. It was on a different site, but I was looking at what people were writing and I saw you there, Amanda, and I was like, okay, this is an interesting conversation. But good morning to 2008. We're so happy to have you here with us. So Dr. Granpeesheh, as we said in the opening, is a true expert in the field of autism. I believe that she is the preeminent expert of our time for autism, and really what other time is there, I ask you. And she's been working in this field for 40 plus years. I know I have such a hard time saying it because she doesn't look that old. She doesn't look like she's 40 plus old, but she's been working in the field that long. So we are going to talk about her skincare. One whole show we're just going to devote to her skincare. But I want the important part is, guys, she's had tons of experience and she's had the right kind of experience. She's been working with individuals from the time they are babies up through senior citizens. She is someone who is famous for talking about looking at the whole individual. I quote her all the time that when she's talking about working with individuals on the spectrum, she says it has to be fair, which I think a lot of people just don't get, Dr. Granpeesheh. So I love her. I know you guys love her. Super excited to have her here answering your questions. I'm going to let her say something for a moment.
No, thank you, Shannon. First of all, thank you. You're always so kind to me with your wonderful compliments. It makes me feel good first thing in the morning. And hi, everyone. It's lovely to have all of you here. And I see that we have Sarah from Dubai. And I think we also have in Mexico, 2008 is in Mexico. I love the fact that we have so many different countries joining us this morning, and I look forward to helping or asking and answering some of the questions that have already come in.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go to a question because somebody wrote into us over the weekend, and I want to cover this. There's actually 2 that came in over the weekend that I want to cover, but I see you guys are writing in big time. Hi, Sarah from Canada. I'm going to get to your live questions here in just a second. But this first one, my son is 8, and I want to know if recovery is still something to hope for. He was diagnosed at 2. At that time, we were dealing with delayed speech. 6 months ago, he started stuttering. And he's 8 now. So his behaviors are up and down. He's gluten-free and dairy-free and has been on a biomedical treatment for 3 years. Good behavior at school, but aggression towards his younger sister and sometimes me. This is mom saying this. He wants to play with other kids, but doesn't know how. He is behind academically. He does well and then regresses. Please help. I want to meet adults who have recovered to know more of how we get there too. Of course, this brings up the word recovery, Dr. Granpeesheh, which is a very volatile term for a lot of people. So maybe if you could take just 1 second to talk about when you're talking about recovery, what are you actually talking about?
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. And honestly, let's start with that. I'm not one who's going to shy away from the word recovery. I know that there are a lot of people who find the word recovery a little bit offensive because, as folks who are on the spectrum themselves, they basically say, "Hey, I don't feel like I need to be recovered from anything." And that's very respectable, very understandable. I want to honor that and say, "Hey, listen, if you don't feel like you need help with anything, that's awesome. That's good, wonderful. I'm so happy that there are people out there who feel that living with autism is doable." That only means that the environment and society has changed to the point where we're able to accommodate that, which is, believe me, you guys, wasn't the case 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I'm happy that we are a much more understanding society now. That being said, there are individuals on the spectrum who either themselves or their guardians feel that there is more for them to learn, and that if they learn more, they can thrive in their day-to-day lives. And that's what we hope to be able to help those folks with, right? So just like anything else, for instance, if I want to do an exercise regime, I will definitely ask for help from someone because I don't want to do things that are going to injure my back, or things that might not be right for me, and I want to get the most out of the time that I have, that I'm committing, that I'm dedicating to my program. And so I look at treatment for autism towards recovery as that, right? I see it as, if you would like guidance and help towards teaching the things that will help your child function more adaptively, more effectively in society, then yes, there are things you can do to achieve that. Now, the way I define recovery, Shannon, is everything that is being able to do things at an appropriate age level. Let's say that's the way to look at it. In fact, very early on when I started doing therapy, whether it was ABA or a kind of a multidisciplinary approach to treating a child, my goal was always to get the child to fall in the normal range for his or her age. So a lot of times I would meet a child who is, let's say, 4 years old, and they're just beginning treatment, and they have a series of symptoms of autism that prevent them from reaching their age appropriate goals. For example, their language functioning might be more like a 1 or 2 year level. Their executive functions may be, again, like a 1 or 2 year level. Their social skills, which are very dependent on language, may also be delayed. And so what I would typically do is I'll look at this individual and I'll gather a list of all the things that where they fall behind their own chronological age. And my goal would be to try to teach them intensively, just like tutoring, and get them to the point where those other skills are reaching their age appropriate, chronological age appropriate levels, right? And in doing so, while I'm teaching these skills, I'm also working on helping the individual replace some of their challenging behaviors with these more appropriate communication skills. The mom who wrote in mentioned that this child has good behavior at school, but aggression towards younger sister and sometimes me. Now, things like aggression or tantrums, throwing objects, biting, spitting at people, you name it, these challenging behaviors, they're not part of the autism diagnosis. They're not symptoms that are required for a diagnosis of autism. They're often present when someone has autism, but that's only because the individual is having a hard time communicating in more traditional, normal ways. And so they find these challenging behaviors to be a useful way of communicating. So if a child over time realizes that every time I aggress, someone's going to give me what I want, or they're going to give me attention, or I'm going to get access to the object I was fighting for, and that's an effective way of communicating, then our kids are intelligent. They will continue to communicate that way, right? But if they learn that, aggression towards the younger sister to get an object doesn't work, and they're not going to get access to that object by being aggressive, but instead they might gain access to the object if they ask nicely, then that will become the more appropriate form of communication. So that's kind of, there's two sides to it, or actually there's, multiple sides to an appropriate effective treatment program. The behavioral, the ABA portion has two divisions. One is teaching the child new skills, and then the second portion is making sure that those skills help replace some of the more challenging ways that the individual has learned to use, challenging behaviors. And that's really it. So to answer this question, recovery is, in my opinion, still possible at the age of 8. It depends on what amount of work is being put in and how many areas need to be caught up, right? It's just like anything else. It's like if I say I want to teach a child to improve their math, right? And I'm going to give them tutoring. If I give them 2 hours of tutoring a week, they will progress, but are they going to progress enough to reach their age level, their class level? I don't know. Maybe the child requires 4 hours a week of math tutoring. And that's kind of the same with therapy and ABA treatment in autism. The more you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. And time is the static factor here. Time is changing, right? The child's getting older. And as they're getting older, the issue is, are we teaching the child enough that with the passage of time, their growth, their learning curve is faster than their aging curve? Are they learning, like each year that passes, is the child learning 2 years worth of information? And if that happens, then eventually their chronological age and their mental age reaches the same point, and that is when they become indistinguishable from peers.
I love everything that you said. I think the only thing is that I don't think that people understand how intensively you need to work to be as successful as possible. And I can only tell you that right after my son was diagnosed with autism, I was at a conference and someone on the stage said, listen, here's the key to everything. If I could tell you right now that you're going to be successful at whatever it is that you want to be successful at, you're going to be successful. But for the next 2 years, you have to work harder than you could ever have imagined in your life. What would that look like? How hard could you work for the next 2 years? But I can guarantee you that you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
And then they said, so what you should do is go work for 2 years that hard. And I guarantee you, you'll be in a different place. And I, they were talking about business and life and careers. They were not talking about autism, but I took that super personally. And I decided to listen to what Dr. Granpeesheh and the other experts in our life were saying, which was, let's take this period of time. They were saying 2 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were even comparing it to, training an Olympic athlete. And they were like, how much time are you willing to put into this? Because the more you double down now, the more successful you're going to consider yourself in 2 to 4 years. It was true. And we took it as serious as a heart attack. And it meant that we gave up on other things that we were doing. It meant that we didn't buy a house. It meant that I didn't take the job that I thought was the job of my dreams. Turned out it wasn't. This was. You know what I'm saying? Like other things reveal themselves to you. But, we said we're going to make we're going to make a manifesto. And the thing at the top of the list was Jem getting everything we can possibly do. And as many hours, and that we're going to learn it. and we're just, but it had a time limit on it. We said 2 to 4 years. I really said 2 years. It was 5. But by the time we were at 3 and I was like, we're not done yet, I was so excited about how much progress we were making. It was nothing for me to double down and go, we're doing this until you get to the end. And so I ask everybody, like, what, and everybody's circumstances are different. I don't sit in judgment because different people can do different things. But what can you do? How much time can you spend? How much energy can you devote to it? Because your child is in a place where he's learning. So how much do you want him to learn?
Absolutely.
I hope that you'll take Dr. Granpeesheh's message to heart and do as much as possible. I want to switch a little bit, Dr. Granpeesheh. Our friend that's in Mexico right now has written in and said that their child is 8. He has been prescribed sertraline, 50 milligrams, half a pill. This is to help with anxiety. He started taking it a week ago. They go on to say that the behaviors are still there. He's grinding teeth and showing still some pretty intensive signs of anxiety. And they're wanting to know your opinion of prescribing these kinds of medicines, and are they actually helpful?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So sertraline is the chemical name for Zoloft, and Zoloft is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI. And what that means is that this medication, when we in our bodies, in our nerves, all of our neurotransmitters, the way that our nervous system communicates throughout the body is that each nerve produces a neurotransmitter, a chemical, and then that chemical is taken up by the next nerve cell, right? So each of our cells, this is how they communicate with each other. SSRIs, all they do is they keep that neurotransmitter in the synapse, which is the area between the two nerves, for a longer period of time. So the second nerve has more opportunity to get the serotonin. So they basically increase our serotonin. And when our serotonin levels, which is one of our neurotransmitters, when that increases, we do tend to feel less anxious. So yes, I absolutely support SSRI treatments for some of our children. Especially, I feel, Shannon, I very, very strongly feel that a large number of kids and adults who are autistic have anxiety, and you would, first of all, a lot of society in general is struggling with anxiety and depression at the moment, but I feel that people on the spectrum even more so. And that's only because, they have a harder time understanding what's going on around them. They are more sensitive to stimuli in their environment. They are often sleep deprived. As you know, Shannon, I always say that I feel I try very hard to understand how our patients or our children are experiencing the world, right? So I try very hard to put myself in their shoes. And I remember one time when I was in China, I had not slept. I had very little sleep because I was jet lagged. And I couldn't understand what was going on around me at all because the letters are not even in English, like Latin letters. They're, Chinese letters. You can't read anything. You don't understand the language at all. You can easily get lost. In fact, when you leave your hotel, they give you a little piece of paper to give to the cab driver because nobody speaks English. So they want to make sure you're not going to get lost. So, and like, there's lots of noise, there's lots of pollution, there's lots of like overwhelming sensory stimuli that I remember, honestly, all I wanted to do was like go back to my room, close all the windows, and just calm down. So I completely understand that our people on the spectrum will, in my opinion, will experience more anxiety. And SSRIs are very helpful. The good news is you've only had your child on an SSRI for a week. Typically, it takes 3 weeks before you see any kind of response with an SSRI medication. So please don't give up. And then the other part of this is that with with autism, like many other disorders, you medication alone is not going to be enough, and you sometimes need, the best opportunity is to have medication and therapy, and those two together work very, very well. So with your child, for instance, it would be easy to teach him not to obsess over his therapy swing behaviorally, especially if he has the support of an SSRI medication. He will care a little bit less. So that's kind of where it's at. I think you just need to stay on the SSRI, on the Zoloft. Zoloft is a very light SSRI, and let's see if that helps. If it doesn't help, please don't give up. Go back to the physician, and sometimes they need to up the dosage. Sometimes they need to change to another SSRI, and then you'll have a very significant effect.
We've had a lot of people writing into the chat about medicines that their child is on, or that medicines that they're on themselves, and how helpful it has been. So I encourage you guys to be looking what some of the other viewers are saying. I do want to cut to some of the questions that came in as a result of what you and I were saying about getting therapy and treatment, because we've had several different comments that I want to address. Ushalad wrote in and said, beautiful, but sometimes I think things would have been easy if it was solely dependent upon us. But it's so much related to our kids, their mood, their behavior, and their health. And many times our kids don't cooperate. And I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about the fact that Sarah wrote in and said, well, I completely agree with you, but I don't have access and can't afford hours of ABA and more than an hour of speech a week. And that that it seems like to her that autistic adults who have recovered or are indistinguishable from their peers, not all of the parents can be rich enough to afford ABA. So what are the ways to help our kids? And I really want to address that too, because I want you to know that I was not capable of paying for a single hour of ABA.
Yeah.
My son got intensive ABA and I didn't pay for any of it, but that's because I found smart people to tell me which line to stand in. So I definitely want to talk about that too, because I think that's a valid, I mean, I remember sitting on the outside going, they were like, oh, well, it's possible that your kid will be okay if you can do 40 hours of this therapy. And before I even asked how much it was, I knew I couldn't afford it. If it was $20, I couldn't have afforded it. So I just thought, well, I'm not going to do that, you know? But then smart people said, oh, here's where you have to go. And it's a little convoluted right now, especially in COVID. But what I want people to know, Dr. Granpeesheh, is that people are still figuring it out. And if you want to know, there are ways to figure it out. I believe.
There
I
are,
believe there are.
and sometimes, Shannon, unfortunately, it's a little bit harder than others, right? So,
Yes,
like,
yes. And now it's hard.
yeah, and I believe that Sarah, who had written in, is also Sarah who wrote earlier and said she's in Canada.
Oh,
And Sarah, it's funny because I just flew in from Canada last night, but Canada, unfortunately, is not providing the same level of assistance as some of the states do. So it is very difficult for families there to access quality ABA therapy. And we'll talk to that. We'll talk about what we, because someone else asked, I think, about how do we define quality, and we can talk about that.
yes.
But it is I think in Canada it's province by province, and there's a fund available. You have to kind of put your child, I'm sure you already have, on the wait list. There's definitely not enough funding for the number of children who need services. I will say that and it's very difficult, and sometimes it's more difficult to get these solutions. I can say that I have worked with a lot of families across the world who have not had access to any funding. But one of my early, let's say, recovered kids, who is currently has gotten his doctorate in robotics and is lecturing across the world and working on building robots that span the surface of the ocean and tell us kind of what is going on underwater and what types of things there are. I mean, so many incredible things this gentleman is doing. He was one of our patients when he was 2 years old, and mom was just an incredible human being who managed to get so many of her, friends at church and neighbors to contribute their time. And she literally had, I don't know, maybe 10 different people coming in and doing 2, 3, 4 hours of work a week. So that the whole thing added up to, let's say, a 40-hour program. She was trained, the dad was trained, everybody in this child's environment was trained and provided just a couple hours a week of one-to-one therapy. And they were able to turn things around very significantly for this young man. So sometimes it's just that hard. But I wish you luck, and I hope that you can find resources, perhaps people who are willing to help do a little bit more. Perhaps you can get good school teachers, aides, people who are willing to just put in the time. Getting the training it's not as difficult, because there are many online programs for parents where you can learn, for anyone who wants to learn to become a registered behavior technician, for instance. There's online classwork that you can do where you learn all the techniques of ABA and how to teach. And that helps, of course. And every time I come on here and answer questions, I'm more motivated, Shannon, to finish writing this book for parents that kind of helps them with the basics, which we really need to do.
Absolutely. I've asked Traven if he can find it. We have a link. We had Dr. Justin Leaf on a couple of weeks ago because his organization has a free RBT training
Great.
that's available right now for anyone. So you can register and take the free RBT training. And so Traven is looking to see if he's got the link to it to post for you guys. That RBT training, for those of you who are like, I don't know what that is, RBT is Registered Behavior Technician, and it's all the things that you would want someone to know to be working with an individual on the spectrum. So Traven's got it up there. It's autismpartnershipfoundation.org. And then there's /courses/RBT. But if you go to autismpartnershipfoundation.org, you're going to be able to have access to it. So you can start by learning the things yourself. But, before we had insurance in the United States, there were a bunch of people who just did like what Dr. Granpeesheh said, and they went to their church. Or there was one mom who lived in a college town, and so she found a sorority, because sororities and fraternities have to have a community project every year in order to have their charter. And she went and found a sorority and said, I would like for you to make my child your community project. And the sorority sisters learned how to do the therapy, and she had a team. She didn't pay anybody. There are people who've done it with their local Knights of Columbus or their Lions Club. Or if you find a certain, like, it takes someone who is on fire and a warrior to build a team. I have a dear friend that I went to college with years before my son was ever diagnosed. Her son was diagnosed, and she had volunteers coming. She had a sign-up sheet, and she had volunteers that would come in and help with her. I was just always in awe of her, because I don't know, honestly, you guys, if I could have done that. But I'm telling you that people have found a way. We can talk about all the ways that it's impossible, because it is. Let's acknowledge that. It's impossible, and yet people find a way. So Jennifer's saying, search for grants in your area. In North Carolina, we found the Autism Strong Foundation that provided us some grants and events to help the community, and there are others. Parker says, when I had ABA, we had a retired teacher and a college student as my main RBTs. It's just, we have to open our minds to, if you say to yourself, it's the pack the tartar sauce conversation, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing. If you're going after Moby Dick, you got to pack the tartar sauce. And I'm going to promise you, people are going to tell you no. That's going to happen. But if you've decided that you're going anyway, if you've already packed the tartar sauce, you will find a different avenue. And maybe you'll find a way that we don't know. And you'll write back in a year, and we'll have you on the show to talk about the way that you found. But if you want to do this, the ways to do it is out there. There is a free way for you to teach yourself and others. You could train a whole team with that free RBT training. It's not going to be easy. Let's not kid anybody. It's not going to be easy at all. But let's talk about something else that's super not easy. We did have a parent over the weekend, Dr. Granpeesheh, write in and said, "Okay, someone, please help. I just had the most horrifying experience ever with my son, who is 4 and autistic. We are staying in a hotel as we were remodeling our home, and our AC heat is currently down, and we live in Florida, and we are not built for 30-degree weather. I accidentally fell asleep earlier with my son and daughter in the room. She fell asleep as well, and he undid the latch and left. I woke up and he was gone, and I went into an immediate panic. I called downstairs. He was there along with about 30 people and 2 police officers. There were a ton of kids with balloons. So now he keeps wanting to go back down there. Is there anything I can buy to keep him in? I have no idea what to do. I put a heavy piece of furniture in front of the door that he somehow can move. He's a huge 4-year-old. It was just an overall horrifying experience, and I'm open to any suggestions at all. Thank you so much." And she says, "I feel like the worst mom in the world right now, and I just am sending her a hug." I'm so glad that it ended the way that it did, because, we have certainly had on the show many other instances that didn't end well when a kid elopes. But I share when, the day that my son eloped, I understand the fear, and I understand the recriminations for yourself of, it must be my fault. It's not. Because I don't know a single person who is able to stay, not even a Navy SEAL can stay awake and alert 24 hours a day. It just isn't possible. So let's all send this parent a hug, but let's talk about problem solving here, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Yeah, and I want to start with the same way you did, Shannon, and just say, like, I am giving you an air hug here. I feel so bad for what you must be feeling. I there's nothing as terrifying as suddenly losing contact with your child and not knowing where they are. So please have some empathy for yourself. It's just, you went through a traumatic experience. Your child probably did not. Probably they were just going downstairs and wondering what's going on, and then found some kids with balloons and so on. So don't blame yourself for this kind of thing. It's possible, and you're only human, and you're doing as much as you possibly can. It is very difficult. I think there are a number of, and they change over time. So I don't know that we have the resources available, like we can list them, because some of the ones that we know from the past might have been replaced. But there are a number of different things you can do. First of all, the cheapest one is you could just order on Amazon or go out and buy. There are these door guards, and it's like an object that's about that big, and you just stick it in the door after you close the door. And if the door opens, it's a very loud alarm that goes off. And they're portable, they're small, they're not more than like $20 or so, and you can use one at your hotel. Or anywhere else. You should have one on every door. When you're in your home, a lot of people will actually put buzzers on the home so that if the door opens, there is also a shrill alarm or a buzzer that indicates someone has come in or is trying to go out. Of course, having, years and years ago, I remember that companies were starting to produce like objects that are similar to a watch, even, that you would put on the child, and it has a radius, so that if the child goes outside of that radius, you will be informed, notified that the child is leaving the safe radius, right? And those are things that are kind of urgent and immediate to do. And then in the long run, elopement is one of the things that a good ABA provider can work with your child. And essentially it is a process where your child is taught about safety, about staying within sight of a parent, And it takes a little bit of work to do, but it is definitely something that can be done through ABA. So I kind of suggest that you know, take care of the urgent needs of just safety, and then that buys you some time to get an ABA provider to work with your child, because elopement is kind of you know, just being aware of your own environment and then realizing what safety actually means. It takes a little while to teach that to a child, but it certainly is absolutely possible to do.
Yeah. And just while you were talking, it occurred to me, if you're in a hotel, hotels often have that hotel lock thing. I think even if you took a strong zip tie and put it through the hotel lock, I'm not saying it would stop him, but it would certainly slow him down. I'll be honest with you, I would do them all. I'd do the alarm, I would do the heavy piece of furniture, and I would do the zip tie because, but here's the other thing I would do. If it's the balloons that even stairs, I would put some balloons in your room. I'm newly all into balloons, you guys. I'm all about the making a balloon arch. I don't know. It's one of those things I've gotten into recently, and I didn't know the balloon arches they don't make them with any helium, and it's a machine that you get, costs like $22 on Amazon, and you can blow up balloons until the cows come home.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing. And, so maybe, that's the new reward system for him, is that, hey, we do something and then you get to blow up 2 balloons. And then we teach him how to tie balloons off, or maybe we just play like, I just did an event in December with the Sensitive Santa, and I sat for a day in a room full of young people, some of them on the spectrum, blowing up balloons with them. And eventually their favorite thing was to blow them up and let them go. Hours of entertainment. So if you're having to entertain him in the room, might be a thing. I don't know. Did you just lose me for a second?
I'm back, but I see that I'm frozen, so I'm not sure
Okay.
about
All
that.
right. We
I'm
thought it
here.
was me that was going to be frozen. Okay. Well, another Sarah wrote in and said that she's a mom of twin boys, 2.5 years old. They've been doing ABA for over a year because yippee-yi-yay. And she says the kids are doing really well, verbal, but not yet conversational. And they're
Mhm.
contemplating sending them to school. What are the key indicators that will help them to make the decision? They don't want to waste their time by sending them to a school if it's not what is appropriate for them at this time. So they are 2.5.
Yeah, so school is a very, very important decision, right? And the reason I say that is not only because you have to find a school that is supportive enough and is going to do all the things that you want them to do for your child when the child is at school, but also because you realize that school is taking away from all the other time, right? So when your child is in school, those are many hours of the child's day, and they better be productive and they better be just fantastic and the best use of time. So when you're looking at 2.5, honestly, I don't know that I would, if it was me, I would take advantage of the early years as much as possible. And I often put school kind of as something that I deal with when the child is 5 or so, because at that point I can't any longer keep them out of school. It's kind of like, when you do want, if you have a good ABA program, if you have a lot of hours, take advantage of not needing to teach academics yet, and use that time to teach language and social skills and all the things that you can focus specifically on just early language, requesting, labeling objects in their environment, giving eye contact, socializing, taking care of their own daily needs. There's like so many things that I would want to work on before reaching academics. Once school hits, your 30 hours of the child's time is taken for academic things. So honestly, I would delay school as much as possible if you have the resources and if you are able, if it's possible for you to get ABA instead. If not, then obviously keeping your child busy with school or anything else is more important or it's better than not doing anything. So I think it's really, really important to use your time wisely, and that is a child by child kind of decision. So you kind of have to look at your child's needs. And a lot of times, Shannon, people will say, "Oh, I want my child to socialize, so I want them in school earlier." And my response is, a child who doesn't have language or is not able to keep up with other children is just not going to learn to socialize just by being put in that environment. It's, prepare the child for socialization by giving them those very important early skills, so that when they are integrated into school, they are more able to interact successfully and they don't feel left out. They don't, they're able to grasp what's going on around them better.
Yeah. I, my mind is full of so many different things here, but I want to say this so that everybody's clear. There were so many things that I messed up when my kid was little that I wish I could go back and redo. I wish I could go back, re-legislate, do all kinds of things. So please don't anybody think that I did it perfectly. There were a couple of things, though, that I lucked into and a couple of things that I did well with. One of the things that I failed at was I didn't stand in the line where I found out about funding sources. So I was still trying to work while my kid was still getting therapy, and it didn't go well for me.
Hmm.
Um, and so I do want to say, because when people were talking about how do you do ABA, how do you afford these things, I do want to say that if you're in California, and especially you have twins, if you happen to be in California, California has a program, IHSS, which
Yeah.
will pay you to stay home with your kids and help them to do what they need to do. So that's not available widely in other states, although it's starting to come more online. But if you could, I mean, you have two kids, and if you could stay home and just focus on them for the next couple of years, and their ABA programs and their enriched environment, it would be super fantabulous, right? If that's not an option, like it wasn't an option for me, because I didn't know about this funding, then you can do other things. But one of the things that I did do right was that somehow I didn't do it really right. I lucked into it. The gal who lived in the condo across from us was part of a group of moms who homeschooled their older kids, and they had younger kids. So they constantly were going and doing things that were just so educationally enriched. They would have an activity to go. They wouldn't just go to the park. They would have an activity to go to the park. And they, didn't just go to a museum. They would put together an activity packet to go to the museum with all the kids. And so it was like the most incredible, open air preschool that we could just drop in whenever we wanted to. So I'll tell you, some of these homeschooling moms, like, hook up with some of them, because I guarantee you that they've got younger kids too, and they probably have something fun going on. But but I'm like Dr. Granpeesheh, your kids are going to spend a lot of years in school, and then you're going to march to whatever the school has going on while you're fighting them for, IEP stuff. And these years, boy, you have this, if they're doing well, you have such an opportunity. I would be looking at keeping them in their ABA program at home as well.
Hmm.
Just saying. Dr. Granpeesheh's advice is much more important than mine, but I'm doubling down on it. Okay, so Dr. Granpeesheh is still here with us, although her picture is frozen.
Yep.
Um, so that's a bummer. But I want to talk a little bit about Renee and Elvira wrote in and said that they were so lucky. I'm so thrilled for you guys that they got a grant from TACA to go see one of the MAPS doctors. Their child is
Great.
7, and they want to know, like, what kinds of things would it be helpful for them to have prepared or to talk about with the MAPS doctor? It's a great question.
That is a great question, and that's wonderful that TACA funded that for you. I do want to let our viewers know that Autism Care Today, or ACT organization, also does fund these types of things. So please feel free to write to us. I founded Autism Care Today, gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago or more. And we provide grants to families. A lot of the grants that we give are for medical evaluations. So when you see the MAPS doctor, they will do a series of tests first
Can I
to.
add two things, Dr. Granpeesheh, that I didn't add
Sure.
because I couldn't? that their particular concerns, he's 7, pre-verbal, has lots of sensory issues, and he's a picky eater. I just wanted you to know that. So go.
Great, great, great. So I think if he's you're going to have lots of different questions to ask, but I think that every MAPS doctor will approach things a little bit differently. They will all tend to start with a series of tests, so blood tests, stool tests, sometimes urine tests, and they will want to be looking at things that are happening biochemically, because their goal is to try to help balance your child's biochemical environment. When you have picky eaters, the doctor will be focused on gastrointestinal inflammation. And so they will probably require a stool test so that they can tell you what types of food sensitivities exist. What are some of the things that are possibly causing inflammation? Like, for instance, is there yeast to be dealt with? Is there bacterial overgrowth to be dealt with? And they will go through and kind of look at it as sort of a tune-up, right? And what they do is they will make sure that the hardware, the GI tract and the blood chemistry is all working in your child's favor. And I saw one of our questions was talking about the GAPS diet, which is one of the diets where you're eliminating a lot of different things like sugar and grains and so on. And there are the doctor, when they do these tests, they help you identify exactly what are the things that you should try to eliminate from your child's diet. Is it gluten? Is it casein? Is it, oh, I'm back. That's nice. Is it all these different things that your child might be reacting to? Or what are some ways that we can restrict diet in order for your child's inflammation to go down? Those things are super important because they will ultimately lead to your child feeling better, sleeping better, and then over time, of course, being more awake, more able to pay attention, and therefore learn better. So I think that's kind of how I look at it when I work with the MAPS doctors. I'm trying to get the child's medical status stabilized. Now so that the child, once they're stable, so that they're sleeping better, feeling better, and able to benefit more from behavioral types of interventions or speech or OT or whatever they might be receiving otherwise. Because realistically, I feel that sometimes our kids are just not feeling good enough to be able to tolerate intensive ABA, right? I mean, a child who's not sleeping, just as an example, sleep alone, one of the most important things, or a child who's feeling very anxious and has obsessive compulsive behaviors, how are they expected to receive 20, 30, 40 hours of intensive ABA work every day when they're sleep deprived, or when they have stomach pain, or whatever else it is, when their diet and their biochemistry is making them feel a little cloudy? So those things have to be fixed, and I think that contributes very significantly to the outcome, which is kind of how the child is actually feeling. Now they're learning better, and overall things will do better. So you don't have to ask specific questions. You just make sure to tell the doctor the things that concern you, such as the dietary issues, or whether or not your child is sleeping, their sensory issues. Those are important things to bring up, and then the physician will know what areas to focus on.
I thank you for mentioning the comment that came in about diet and GAPS. We've had a lot of people write in about diet and GAPS, but there's one thing here in particular that I want to address. That mom says that she really believes in dietary intervention and how important it is, but that dad feels like it's a punishment to the child because of restrictions. And I understand, she's talking about the GAPS diet, which is pretty restrictive, but it's not restrictive forever, but it's pretty restrictive.
Yeah.
And I want to hear from you, Dr. Granpeesheh, but I also want to say that, my son was on a gluten-free, casein-free diet starting when he was 2.5. And then we went on a specific carbohydrate diet for a period of time.
Yeah.
And he on a modified Feingold, and we never did gaps with him. We did gaps with me because I was having stomach issues. But my mother would just rail at me, and she would come and visit, and she would go, "Is this child never going to get to have a jelly bean? Is he never going to enjoy the joy of ice cream?" And I tried saying all kinds of things to her, but then finally I said to her, "Is that what you want for him? You want for him, that's your be all end all? You want him to have a jelly bean and an ice cream? Let's go right now and you can feed him ice cream and a jelly bean, Mom. I just want you to know that his ability to communicate will be hampered for the next 2 days to 2 weeks. And he won't be the child that you're seeing right now. He's going to have tantrums and he's not going to be able to connect with you. But if what you really want is for him to have the jelly bean and ice cream, if that's what's important to you, let's go do it." And she said, "Really? He'll have difficulty talking?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, but if you need to see it, if you don't believe me, shall we do it? Shall we go? Let's go try that with him." And she said, "No, why would I ever want to do that?" And she said, "So by
Yeah.
not giving that, you're letting him have the rest of his life." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Okay, I want to learn everything." And she got on
Yeah.
board. She stopped
Yeah.
with "You're punishing him." And by the way, my child has ice cream all the time now. He has a wonderful, coconut ice cream that has no dairy, has no sugar in it. It has fruit in it, and he's as happy as a clam.
Yeah.
uh, and in college and doesn't need any other supports and picks out his own ice cream.
Yeah.
I feel like we chose right. But I understand people. My mother was like, "Well, I was putting it through my filter. If I was told I could never have a jelly bean or an ice cream, and what that would feel like to me." I think we have to acknowledge that people have issues with food themselves that have nothing to do with what you're trying to do for your child.
Yeah,
My 2 cents.
definitely true, Shannon. Absolutely right. And I think we all need to recognize that food is a reinforcer. And chocolate and ice cream and sweets, think of them as short-term reinforcers. And other things like mental clarity and the ability to be awake and learn as long-term things that we're trying to go. So it's kind of like, you give the child ice cream, he might receive a certain joy from it at that moment because his sweet taste buds are rewarded, let's say. But at the same time, your child's going to probably, or a lot of our kids experience bloating, indigestion, reflux, all kinds of symptoms of irritable bowel. Sometimes our kids have diarrhea, 5, 10 times a day. So those are not rewarding. So whereas the food might for a moment be enjoyable, and 2 hours later the child is struggling. And even if they're not experiencing those very overt signs of gastrointestinal distress, there's no question now that certain types of foods in our environment, not just for kids on the spectrum, but overall, are the food in our environment unfortunately has such a high level of toxicity and is so, I mean, I get very passionate, as you know, Shannon, talking about the food source in our country and in many other countries now, being completely packed with pesticides and also genetically modified, so that you're not really receiving nutrition from these types of foods. And the fact that the whole world is going back to organic foods and plant-based foods is a wonderful thing. And I know that it's tough initially because you have a young child, and believe me, I spoiled my kids too when they were young. But at the same time, you get to a point where health is the goal, right? And with health in mind, you have to find other short-term reinforcers like social time, toys, activities, whatever else might be that is not harmful at the same time to the child. And I know there's no, it's a primary, right? Food is a primary reinforcer, so it's hard to replace it with other things. But I want to tell you something, because I myself, 18 days ago, started a diet that's very similar to the GAPS diet. It's not as restricted because it doesn't eliminate starchy vegetables, but it is pretty close in the sense that there's no grains, no dairy at all. and no processed foods at all. So, I mean, it's the whole 30 for those of you guys who know what that is. So, on my diet right now for the past 2.5 weeks or so is restricted to just mostly, of course, meats, but and just vegetables and fruits, right? And I will tell you that I hardly ever enjoyed certain fruits before this diet, and just 2 weeks into it, the taste of oranges, for instance, is like, it's more sweet than ice cream. So your taste buds change when you're on these diets, and you begin to appreciate natural sugars. Our kids too. And you appreciate them because you sense them more. And now my body is adjusting, and I've never felt more awake than on this diet. I mean, they say you're not supposed to stay on these diets for very long, extended periods of time, but I feel like I could stay on this diet forever because it just makes me, in the long term, feel so much better. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these restrictive diets for your children. They overall feel better. I'm definitely sleeping better as well. So these are important things.
And Parker wants to remind us that diet is not one size fits all. Thank you, Parker. I always appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons for going to one of the MAPS doctors, because there are so many diets that are out there. They're not one size fits all. And the MAPS doctor might be able to look at your tests and say this diet over this diet. They want to know if you have any recommendations for MAPS doctors that you like, Dr. Granpeesheh, and if you are seeing or taking new patients.
I love a lot of the MAPS diets doctors. Dr. Rosignol, obviously in Orange County, is the one that oversees all of the MAPS programs. So he's a great doctor in Orange. This is in the Orange County area of California, or Los Angeles, south of Los Angeles, between LA and San Diego. I really like him, and there are many other doctors who work in that area. I think Dr. Sears is back. There's a lot of good doctors in that region. On the East Coast, my favorite doctor is Dr. Berger. He's a great doctor. Dr. Levinson is in Florida. There are a lot of really good MAPS physicians. And in order to become a MAPS doctor, you basically have to go through a series of trainings so that you're familiar with all of these procedures. So there you go. There's a lot to choose from. There are many on there as well over the last few years who I haven't met personally, so I'm sure they're also very good.
Wonderful.
As far as me, I would love to take patients. I'm kind of getting a little overwhelmed right now because I'm trying very hard to write, as you know, Shannon, and I'm trying to manage my time better so that I can write some books that will help lots and lots of families. But I do take cases mostly when it's a difficult situation where nobody can figure things out, or they don't know if the child has plateaued and somebody needs help figuring out what to do to get the child learning again. Or if it's a child in a state where they have a 2-year wait list for diagnosis. I do a lot of diagnostics still, those types of things.
Wonderful. We're getting close. We're at the end, but I do want to say there have been a lot of questions about what's quality ABA. We've written something. I am going to get it to you. I keep saying that, but I am going to get it to you. And Jasper wanted to know just very quickly, does ABA work when there's a dual diagnosis of pathological demand avoidance? His daughter is 9. And they want to know, is it too late for ABA? They are in Canada, and they cite that the Conservative government has frozen funding. But just purely, will it work with pathological demand avoidance?
Yeah.
And 9 too late?
Yeah, no, you can't. ABA does work on, like anything else, a label like autism or demand avoidance is just a label. And if you think about the fact that with ABA, your goal is to teach the individual, the child, to use communication, appropriate ways of communication to interact, as opposed to avoiding demands by doing challenging behaviors, it is very possible for the child to learn that, definitely. I mean, a child can continue to avoid demands by using their language. And that's one of the things that, for instance, ABA will teach the child. we all to some extent avoid demands. Think about it, right? Kids who want to, we make excuses for all kinds of stuff, but we use our language. We don't use challenging behavior. That being said, I feel that every child will accept demands as long as they feel there's adequate reinforcement once they have abided by the demand. So we all avoid demands when we feel like there's no reward in it for us. So I would suggest that you really kind of look at what are the things that are reinforcing for your child, and if you put all of those in the child's environment when they do comply with the demands.
Yes, wonderful. And I do have to mention that Dr. Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for more than 40, yes, I said 40 years, working with all kinds of individuals from very young babies up through senior citizens. She is, I think, I say all the time, the preeminent expert in our time. I have to find better words for that, because I don't think that adequately describes how I feel, because not only is she somebody who has the experience and the know-how, but she has the compassion. She is widely known in the field, controversially so, for looking at individuals on the spectrum as individuals, which to me sounds like, why can't we have that from all of our professionals? But apparently that's a reach and a climb, not for Dr. Granpeesheh. She's been doing this, as I said, for more than 40 years. But she not only looks at those individuals as individuals, but looks at each family unit as an individual unit to see what they need, what they're looking for, and how to best help them to get to their best lives, which is really remarkable. So we appreciate her and thank her. That is why we named her the Autism Advocate of the Year, because she is so uniquely fabulous at this. She donates this time to answer your questions, so I'm glad that you guys are writing in. We're going to start with Michelle this morning, who says, good morning. I sent some information. I feel way better. I got 1 month, 1 week off. I needed time to take care of my mental health. I last worked on January 26th, and I'm going to work on Tuesday, March 22nd, with a bunch of medical appointments and dentists. I wish to fix my chart. Nasty flaw for life or death situations on all platforms. They said there's no backspace.
This is,
Okay.
I think it's her medical charts at some, I'm not sure where.
Yes. Okay, so I'm not sure what your question is. Okay, but you're looking for a place to report doctors to HR and CEO staff. Well, that's a pretty interesting thing, because I think this is information we all need to have, right, Dr. Granpeesheh? When things aren't working out for you medically, and help me, Michelle, if I've gotten it wrong, but that you're meeting a lot of obstacles gaining access to your medical care. So I know everybody I know is going through some version of this right now. Maybe we can share some tips and tricks. But as someone who is a PhD, Dr. Granpeesheh, what advice do you have for someone who is coming up against difficulties in the medical system?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think, Shannon, it's been the last couple of years, right, where pretty much everybody has, first of all, I mean, across the globe, the medical needs have increased, right? So we're all kind of having additional issues and want to access our doctors, our providers, get some feedback from them, get some help from them. And they are pretty overwhelmed, and also, I think, burnt out. Like, let's just face it. Anywhere you go, people are burnt out over COVID issues, and especially healthcare. I think it would be true to say that about healthcare providers, because they've been on double speed, I guess, for the last couple of years. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that, because we just need to be a little bit more patient and calm with things. I know for a fact that a lot of people are trying their best. They just are burnt out. They're tired and they've done everything they can. Now, that being said, it is very, very frustrating and annoying to not access your records, or not to be able to tell someone that what you're trying to get across. So I find that it's always best to pick up the phone and call someone. We've all become very used to online and email, text, etc. But calling, I think, is an easier way to solve problems because you could go back and forth and figure out exactly what's going on. And just make sure that when you call, it's not on a day when you're particularly upset or annoyed, because that usually doesn't get us to move forward. It's always a little bit more helpful if you're calm and have the time and you call, and then someone can walk you through the process.
Absolutely. And just like in the field of autism, I think it matters what words you say. And here's the fun part. And when I say fun, I'm saying that sarcastically, that each medical company has different words that they use. But I find that if you do what Dr. Granpeesheh says, get on that phone, make yourself your favorite beverage, put on music that you like, and have it ready to mute when, put your phone on speaker so that when the whole time is not miserable for you. But when you talk to the person, keep saying to them, first ask what their name is and write it down, and then use their name repeatedly. So if they say, "This is Jeff," you say, "Hi, Jeff. Thank you. I'm so happy that you're going to be helping me today. Jeff, I'd like to speak to the person who is the patient advocate." And if he says there is no such person, then say, "Well, is there an ombudsman that deals with, who can I talk to?" And use these words: "I'm having difficulty accessing my care. I need to speak to someone." If you feel comfortable saying, "I'm someone with a disability, I'm having trouble with your system." But keep saying, "Jeff, here's the thing," because he will know that if you complain, you're going to use his name, and he will work harder for you. These are the little tricks that we've learned along the way. And ask him, what is the name in your company? What is the name of someone when you escalate patient issues? And keep saying, if you feel comfortable saying, "I have a disability and your system isn't working for me and I'm having trouble accessing my care," because those are things that are actionable legally. And that they won't want to have happen. But keep using his name. And I find that it might take an hour, it might take an hour and a half. Jeff may hang up on you, but then you call back and you replenish whatever your favorite drink is, continue playing the music. If you need to put on your favorite TV program and have the remote there so you can mute it when they finally pick up the phone. But this is the horrible truth of our healthcare system right now, is that you have to be a good advocate for yourself. And unfortunately, sometimes you don't feel up to it. If you need to, ask someone else, "Could you please do this for me and sit next to me? And can you go through the tree for me? And then I'll talk to them once we get there." It's horrible. But I can do it for somebody else. I often can't do it for myself.
Because you get emotionally invested in it, right?
Right. But I, and so I have a friend that we sort of trade these things. There are certain things that I can do that she, and things that she can do. I can't do spreadsheets, as you well know, Dr. Granpeesheh. It's not my thing. And she can do a spreadsheet like a dream, but I can do customer service things. So we'll trade. I'll say, I'll make 3 customer service calls for you if you will take care of this spreadsheet for me. And she goes, "Okay." And we trade, right? So, see if there's somebody in the family who maybe can help you to do that, because you need to be able. And yes, when there's a mistake on an app, Michelle, it's like, forget it. They might have your middle name wrong, and they will put that on your death certificate if you don't work hard enough to change it and find the person who owns the company. So in any case, I'm sending you hugs, Michelle, and hoping that you can work it out. I want to move over to a question about teeth. That we've had a viewer who's written in and said, my son's teeth forms plaque quite often. It's because he doesn't let me brush it properly at night. I hate exposing him to dental clinics more often than I need to. And they said that they want to know, does everybody have the same issue with their kids not wanting to brush their teeth? She feels that the dental offices are full of toxicity, as they use a lot of different chemicals. So that's part of why she would like to limit the number of times that her child goes. But let's talk about how traumatic going to the dentist office can be too. So if our kids are creating plaque and they don't want us to brush their teeth and they don't want to do it themselves, a lot of times we get a little paralyzed, Dr. Granpeesheh. I'll hold my hand up. What can we do?
Well, this is coming from someone who absolutely hates the dentist. Let me just tell you, like, I will take any medical procedure over a dental procedure. Just, I don't know why, but I've always had a thing with dentists. So what I do, and I think, and I did this with my children as well, and I did it not just with the dentist, but this is a good practice anyway. Whenever you want to do something that is a little bit difficult. So what I want to do is first talk about like some things you can do to make the visit to the dentist better or to the doctor. And then I want to go back and talk about just the whole teeth brushing process, because that's, reduces your need to go to the dentist, hopefully. So both of those are just think of it in terms of it's a behavior you want to increase. So whenever we talk about you want to increase a behavior, what do you have to do? You have to increase reinforcers for that behavior, right? So whether it is a matter of going to I'll give you guys an example. When I used to take my kids to the doctor, pediatrician or dentist, whatever, it would always be, I would make it a really, really fun trip, right? So that, let's just start right there. It would be, hey, we're going to have a great time today. Today is the best day. We're going to do this, and then I would make sure that after, like when we go to the visit itself, we'd have plenty of activities with us. So when you're the worst time, I think for kids, I mean, and it actually classical conditioning works backwards. So if they've had once a bad experience, which obviously just any kind of injection is a bad experience for a child, you work it backwards, and before you know it, they have learned subconsciously, they've become conditioned to hating even the word doctor, getting in the car to go to see the doctor, being in the waiting room, all of that. It just, all of those completely benign things become very negative, right? Because they mean, oh, next I'm going to go get a shot or something. So what I used to do was I used to just like really pour on the reinforcers, right? And like make sure that after the doctor, every time we'd go downstairs, in most medical buildings, there's a little pharmacy or store downstairs, and we definitely would go there and buy some junk, like whatever, whether it was like little toys, candy, whatever it was. Now, that's just the kind of the easiest way to do it. But sometimes with our kids, they develop real phobias that you kind of have to work through. And whenever I'm talking about a phobia, it's not enough to force your child through it and then reward them afterwards for finishing it. You actually have to work on overcoming the fear, which means you would, for instance, get your child in the car, go to the doctor's office and not see the doctor, right? Just have a positive experience with, let's say, the waiting room. And another, so each phase of seeing the doctor, sometimes with our kids who've had like extreme trauma from a doctor's visit or hospital visit, we even will practice the whole process of injection using like a fake syringe. So something like a pen or just an empty syringe, right? Where you just go like this so that the child realizes that it's not, they just become more familiar with it. And the more familiar you become with something, the less fearful you are. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of like reduce the fear of the actual visit. Exposure and reward, breaking it down, exposing the child to each step, and then giving lots and lots of reward, which also means removing demands from the rest of the day. So you could make it a special day whenever a child needs to do a doctor's or a dentist visit, and they can skip school and they can get all these goodies and all that sort of stuff. Now, going back to the whole concept of trying to avoid going to the dentist, it's the same basic idea, right? So we want to make it so that the experience of brushing teeth is pleasant or as pleasant as possible for our children, because they don't realize the long-term consequences of, cavities. That's just way too far down the line for them to realize I have to do this in order to not suffer 3 or 5 years from now, right? So what we have to do is, first of all, make the bathroom a very positive environment, put some toys in there that the child cannot access otherwise. So they would have to be in the bathroom, like same kind of idea, Shannon, as the toilet training.
Yeah.
Maybe get your child one of those vibrating toothbrushes that also play music. There's a lot of toothbrushes nowadays where they light up, they play a song, and you brush your teeth until the song ends, which I love that for kids. They didn't have them when my kids were young. But and make sure that you buy like a toothpaste that has a good taste, and then make a good big deal out of like, oh, look how beautiful your teeth are afterwards, and like take pictures or something like that, so that it's more of a game. Now, remember, a lot of our kids have sensory defensiveness to the inside of their mouth. And if you do it gradually, if you teach them, if you give them control, actually, like rather than stick a toothbrush in their mouth, hold their hand and help them do it. When they have control over it, it's a little bit more pleasant because it's not as, I guess, shocking or intrusive. And they start doing that, manipulating and using vibrating toothbrushes inside the mouth is actually fabulous for apraxia. Like it is something that will help the child be able to enunciate and produce sounds better. So there, if you, as you're doing it, this is, think about the fact that it's something that also helps your child's language skills. But you have to do it gently. You have to keep in mind that our kids are very sensitive inside their mouth. And by the way, other things that you can do during, aside from when you're brushing teeth, is just help, like things like chewing gum. Those types of things also help the child become less sensory defensive in their mouth. And sometimes you can actually put the toothbrush in the mouth. Don't turn it on. Just put it in for 1 second, then put it in for 5 seconds. Over time, you're kind of shaping this behavior. And don't forget, of course, reward, reward, reward.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of comments coming in. Amanda says that she found that using a non-foaming toothpaste helped, like Dr. Bronner's. Also, Amanda says that there are apps too that you can put on. And if you don't have the vibrating toothbrush that plays the song, there are apps. Amanda, if you have a favorite one, put it in the comments because I'd love to know more about that. Parker says dentists are a lifesaver. I still have trouble brushing my teeth properly. Having a younger sister studying to be a dental assistant does help. I'm sure that does. But then a follow-up question, Sarah says, thanks for answering my question, but what about the dental instruments? I've heard that they are made of aluminum and my son's tests show high toxicity. So this is another concern for me, putting the aluminum instruments in his mouth more often. And what is your thought? Can I just say that I just did a bunch of research on this because I was looking for a new dentist. And we live here in Los Angeles, and there is a big movement here. I don't think it's just in Los Angeles for green dentists. And I don't know what the word is, Dr. Granpeesheh. Maybe you know, it's like bio something dentistry, and it's a little, it's more holistic, and they are a little bit more careful about what the instruments they put are in, what things they do fillings with. They're wildly expensive, and most insurance doesn't cover them. But there's one guy that I found here in LA that before he'll see you, he has you do a blood test to see what you're allergic to before he sticks anything in your mouth. Wow. Which, you know, I think a lot of people would say is really excessive, but if you're somebody who's really reactive to things, I could see myself doing it.
Absolutely. And why not? And you know, also it takes a little bit of research, right? Every town that you live in, finding the right person. But first of all, I don't know if the instruments are made of aluminum. I don't know if they are. I don't think they are, but I don't know.
I'm allergic to nickel, so I'm always looking things up, and everything that I found said that there's surgical steel.
Steel, exactly. That's what I thought. So the other thing is, you know, call around. There are actually dentists who not only are familiar with all of these issues of, you know, allergy and reactions, but they're also very familiar with autism. I mean, I did several trainings over the years for groups of dentists who wanted to learn sort of how to manage and how to make the experience more positive for an individual with autism. So I know that there are dentists who have that training, and you definitely want to try to find someone who does understand a little bit about the sensory sensitivities associated with autism.
There we go.
And
I want to.
thing I
Oh, go
want
ahead.
to say with the dentist, I found, and some dentists will have TVs in their offices, and I think
Yes.
it's so incredibly helpful to have, even if you go with a dentist who doesn't, just to take an iPad, play something on there for your child while they're having the procedures done, and it is much, much better because the child is somewhat distracted.
Okay, Amanda wrote in and said Hum, H-U-M, which is put out by Colgate, makes great apps. It shows the kid in the app and the teeth sections, directing them where to brush, and provides them with visual rewards for doing it. That's fantastic. And Ka says, I take my son to a pediatric dentist and she understands special needs and works amazingly with my son. Absolutely. We love hearing those stories, you guys. I want to go to a question that Bonnie sent in, and it's in many parts. So I'm going to have you start answering, and then I'm going to scroll to put the pieces together.
Okay.
Bonnie says, my son is 8 and he's going to an inclusive school with a shadow. And he screams when he does not get his way. He's found a new way to communicate what he needs by yelling, help me. What can we do so that he stops this behavior? Thank you. I know that she goes on to say that he is functionally verbal, not conversational yet. And I know that there was another place where she said he squeezes I want to get it right. He also squeezes the shadow's hands and my hands very hard when he is upset and frustrated. So, but yelling, help me. I mean, isn't that ingenious? Like, he's learning, but learning how to get him to use that only when appropriate. What do you think, Dr. Granpeesheh?
Yeah, so and this is the kind of stuff that our kids learn, unfortunately, and when they observe, let's say, another child. This is a child in an inclusive school with a shadow. He's probably seen a child yelling, help me, and everyone dropping everything they're doing and running over there to help the child, right? So I think as difficult as it might be, it happens with kids where they will use expressions, or they will what's that story you tell children about lying, right? When they're
the boy who cried wolf,
right?
Yeah.
So it's similar to that in that sense. But I think what you have to do at this point, Bonnie, is that you just have to treat the screaming and the yelling of help me. You need to extinguish this right now, as difficult as it is, because it is a very adaptive functional behavior. You do need to extinguish it because he's applying it to situations that are not real. So the entire team who works with him, and the most important here is when our kids go to school, it's so difficult because there's now a whole different environment where you don't necessarily control all the contingencies. So you need to make sure that everyone who is with him at school, the shadow, the teacher, the resource specialist, everybody is in agreement with this, because it's going to take a while unless everyone does the exact same thing, which is when he screams or yells, help me, and there's no reason. In other words, he's doing it because, I think she said, he doesn't get his way, right? He does it when he doesn't get his way. That needs to be ignored. And the situation just needs to continue. In other words, let's say he wants access to something and he's not getting his way. Do not give him access to that object, just as if he didn't say it, or as if he's not screaming. Now, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's called an extinction burst. And that is when our kids do a particular behavior because they're trying to get your attention, for instance, and you don't attend to it. What's happening in their mind is, wait a minute, this behavior used to get attention. It's not. Let me just do it a little bit more extreme. Let me be louder. Let me be more intense. And when you ignore that, eventually it goes away. Now, once it has gone away, and once he realizes the screaming and the yelling, help me, it doesn't work, then it's important to teach him to use a similar or even the same phrase when there actually is a need for help. And that would be a scenario where you will actually teach it. So for instance, you will bring a box. This is how we teach Help Me, which is we will start with a container that is very difficult to open. And the child brings you the container and says, help me, and you will help them open it. Or they want to reach a place and you teach them how to. So we don't necessarily, we don't start using help me as a rescue phrase until much, much, much later. We use help me as just an aid phrase. I need help with this object, or I need help to reach something, or I need help to manipulate something in my environment first. And then the child realizes, okay, this is what help me means. When the child needs attention, we teach them different phrases for that, right? So, and of course, a lot of times, unfortunately, our kids, it's not just that he needs attention, but our kids learn to escape the situation. That's like the biggest function in school. Because in school, if you have a tantrum or something, it is very likely that they're going to take you out of the classroom. And that actually becomes a reward for the child. It's like, yay, all I had to do was scream and they would let me go to the playground. And, that is always the wrong thing to do. I mean, I know it's very, very hard in school because we have other kids there and the classroom, and it becomes disruptive. But one of the things that really, really has a negative effect is when a child screams, and then they're taken out of the classroom, because our kids are smart and they learn, hey, every time I want to leave and go outside, I'm just going to scream. So hopefully that helped to answer your question, Bonnie. It starts with literally not allowing him to gain access to the thing that he wants when he screams or yells.
Wonderful. And I gotta say, just an extra thing, just from the parent's perspective, is if you're going to do this kind of intervention, I would say for a hot minute, make your circle a little bit smaller and let everyone in on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you're at the playground and your child is going, help me, and you're ignoring them, you're going to have a host of other problems. And if you have Aunt Betty over for tea and you don't tell her, listen, at a certain point, he's going to start yelling, help me, just to move a teaspoon, and you're not going to respond to that, then Aunt Betty's going to give you a lecture, which is not what you need in the moment. Yeah. So make it smaller for a period of time and let everybody know, even if you have to print up little cards, that if somebody says, why aren't you helping your child? It says, my child, is having a problem right now, yelling, help me inappropriately. And so we're, with the help of experts, we're doing an intervention so that people will crawl off of your spine. Because people get all judgmental. It's just super, super extra fun. I want to move to a question here from Yasmin, and it's another one that's in a lot of different parts here, so stick with me. She says, hello, so happy to have you both, and we're so happy to have you too as well, Yasmin. I have a question about my 11-year-old son with autism. He's obsessed with toilets and hand dryers. When we go out, he wants to use the bathroom more than once. And if we go to different places, he wants to use all the bathrooms available to him. It can be hard because some days I just have enough time to run in and run out of a place. And if he can't use it, he'll get mad. I think she said more, but he can hold his pee for a very long time. So I know sometimes he does not need to go. I let him go at least once when we go out, sometimes 2 times. He draws the toilets and knows the different brands. When we sometimes don't let him go more than once, he'll get mad and say, I'm still going to use the bathroom, or I'll go use it by myself. What happens, he says it in a threatening kind of way sometimes. It's very hard to just go out to more than one place. He says he loves the toilets and the hand dryers. How can we help with these obsessive things? And thank you in advance.
Sure.
Great question.
So that's a great question, Yasmin, and I'm sorry that you're going through this. It's always tough when our kids establish some sort of obsession with an object, and it could be any object, and they will do it, all the stuff that you just said. They will try their best to get to it and then draw it, talk about it, etc. So I'm going to suggest 2 things. One is, And Shannon, you and I talk about this a lot. Whenever there's a issue like this, and we're in the middle of daily life, it's very, very hard to deal with it. Because as I think Yasmin also said, like we have other things to do or we're busy or whatever, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
But put aside time to specifically deal with this issue. For example, I don't know, every day after school, we're going to stop at a place that has a bathroom. And for the purposes of working on this, or even just once a week or whatever it is. So that you don't have other constraints. You're not focused on, oh my gosh, I got to get shopping done, or oh my gosh, I got to get back home, or whatever it is. And you literally will go to the place and you will not go to the bathroom and he will get mad. And that's okay. And it's just okay. It's because before you know, and then you will put him back in the car and you will go home and you will ignore the fact that he's mad. And I don't know how big he is or what kind of a fit he can throw if he's really, really angry. But hopefully it's manageable and you can still walk around the store. The minute he starts talking about the bathroom, just go back in the car, let's go home. The point is that he needs to realize that he will not get his way by becoming mad. And that's exactly what is happening here, is that a lot of times our kids realize that if I make a big enough fuss, they will let me have what I want. And that's not what you want to do, right? Now, if you are absolutely allowed. Initially, I would just say no. And he is absolutely allowed to go to the bathroom. Let's say if you think, oh, you know what, we've been out here for an hour or 2 hours and he should go one time, which is probably normal in a 2 to 3 hour excursion, then please do take him. Do not let him play with stuff in there. Do not let him spend excessive amount of time in there. You just go in there, do your business, wash your hands, dry your hands, and come out. And gaining control over that, you can use a timer. You can certainly use a timer that he needs to be out of there within, let's say, 3 minutes or 5, whatever is typical. You should time what you think is the appropriate amount of time. And that's it. And a lot of times, the reason I like this question is that we often do things because we're afraid of our kids getting mad. But it's okay if he gets mad. It doesn't matter. You're trying to teach him things that are okay and not okay. Now, at home, he's still going to be probably obsessed with drawing that. I would get him to start drawing a whole bunch of other things and see if you can broaden his thoughts to other types of objects. Now, that's one thing, right? That's the behavioral way to deal with it. A lot of times our kids have such incredibly strong obsessive needs that behavioral way is not enough. And it's almost like you're constantly there, nonstop thinking about this thing that has become their obsession. And that's when I want you to go and talk to his pediatrician, get a referral for a psychiatrist, and consider SSRI medications, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which help when we have obsessive compulsive types of needs. And what they do is they will just basically reduce the edge a little bit so that he's not 24/7 thinking about that particular object. And I say this as a behaviorist, but also as someone who's had over 40 years of experience with kids on the spectrum. And some kids have such serious obsessive needs that it almost becomes impossible to get them to pay attention to anything else. And this medication, which is it's not harmful. All it does is allow your own neurotransmitter serotonin to remain in your nerve endings and your synapse longer. So it's not like it's introducing a foreign thing to your body. It's just helping your body use its own neurotransmitter better. And with that, you just calm down a little bit and you are less likely to panic and freak out when you don't have access to that one thing you're obsessed about.
She does tell us that he's on sertraline right now. At the moment.
Yeah, great. So I'm glad that you have a physician. You need to talk to them because these kind of obsessive things can be controlled with increasing, decreasing, changing meds. SSRIs in particular, some work and some don't for depending on the chemical shape and the individual who's trying it.
Wonderful. Aisha has written in and said, hello, thank you for your work and for what you do. My son is 9 years old, diagnosed with autism since he was 3 and we moved from North Carolina to the Philadelphia area, and we were looking for ABA therapy. Do you have anybody that you recommend, any facility that you recommend in the Philadelphia area?
I don't, but there are, I mean, we could go back, I guess, and talk about you should just look online, right? And there will be now, fortunately, hundreds of ABA providers all over the country. I would say, and Shannon and I have written about how you identify a good ABA program. And I just like the initial, and Shannon helped me remember some of the things we wrote, but I would say the most important things you're looking for is what is the level of training that their behavior technicians receive, assuming that all of their supervisors are BCBAs. BCBAs are master's level people who are board certified. Questions you should ask are, how much time is the BCBA actually going to spend with my child? How much training and what training do the behavior technicians working under that BCBA receive? What is the philosophy of the organization in regards to intensive therapy and recovery? Those are some of the more important questions, because if it's an agency that thinks ABA should be done at 2 hours a week, then I'm not going to recommend them. I'm just not going to recommend them. ABA is done intensively because there's a ton of stuff to teach each of our kids. It's done a different amount for each child, but the fact that it is the best type of teaching for our kids, there's no question about that. And therefore, the more of it, the better. So those are some of the things. And also find out if they have high turnover, if they have a lot of therapists, because you need to make sure you're when you have a schedule with your child, they are able to actually provide hours during the hours that you sign up. A lot of ABA therapists struggle with providing the therapy they promise you.
There you go. And we have written an article about this, Dr. Granpeesheh and I, and it's going to be available to those who subscribe to our channel. I promise you by April 1st, I'm going to have that ready. And so it will go to anyone who subscribes to the channel, even if you've done it a way long time ago. So that's what we're getting that ready for. I also want to say, Ka has said, my son just diagnosed 3 months ago at age 7. And even though it's been obvious he is autistic and has severe ADHD, now we're trying to get him services. It's a challenge. The school isn't providing ABA or OT to him one-on-one. The medical side says he can't get the amount of services needed, as the school has to do the school behaviors, but they aren't. What can I do to get him what he needs and has been robbed of? And Ka, if you can remind me, what state are you in? I don't remember. Or are you in Canada? Because it makes a difference. Wish it didn't, but it does, where you're at. But Dr. Granpeesheh, initial thoughts while we wait to hear from Ka?
Yeah, and this is the really unfortunate business of people just throwing the ball at each other and saying, hey, it's in your court. You ideally, Ka, what you're going for is services from both sources. Ideally, you will want to call an IEP, and in the IEP, I think, did they say the child is 9?
Not 9 or 7. She says she's in California though. So Ka, you just won the lottery.
Yeah. California people are pretty familiar with ABA and the services, and there's a lot of funding for it. So what you do is you get your school district, first of all, to get on board and do an IEP. Once an IEP is done, the discussion becomes who's going to actually provide the services that are in the IEP. And realistically, most of the time, a teacher cannot be responsible for those goals because they're busy dealing with 20 other kids. So that's where you fight with the districts and you request an aid for your child to specifically generalize skills that are needed to the school environment. It's not going to be a whole lot, to be honest. Schools have managed to throw everything at health insurance and they take very little responsibility. But I will tell you, the parents that make the biggest fuss still do have a lot of hours funded by districts. So please don't hesitate and go for it. Like, really go for it. And if you have to get an advocate or an attorney, watch our show with Bonnie Yates. I'm sure she can give you a lot of feedback. But you should get legal representation if you need to, because school districts will 99.9% of the time actually give in and give you the funding that you're requesting in the end. But it's going to be limited to school hours, right? And what you really do need for your child, the way I look at it, is you need hours after school and on the weekend where your child will get one-to-one ABA in home or at a clinic. And then the stuff that they learn there is what the aide will be working on generalizing during the school. So for you, and that of course is just find an ABA provider and make sure your health insurance covers it, and then contact talk to the ABA provider, get a program going for your child, which focuses on the specific areas you are concerned with, and then ask for the two groups to meet, the aide and the ABA provider, so that they're on the same page. But you honestly, being in California, you should be able to get coverage around the clock. You just have to fight for it. And they will tell you every step of the way that you're not going to get it. You are going to get it. I have so many parents that actually receive both of those services funded, and they just have to be very tough about it.
Yeah, and I said that Ka had won the lottery because she's in California, because California has more access to services, and more people in California that are in those service things have been sued and are afraid of being sued. And I'm more familiar with them. So Ka, rather than go through everything, because there's so many things that are available to you, if you will shoot me an email, I will happily walk you through a bunch of things that will help you to get started. And he's 7, Dr. Granpeesheh. I went back and looked. He's 7 years old. So there's still a lot of services that are available to you. And in the state of California, there's financial help available to you. So please shoot me an email. You may already have done, but send me another one and let's have a conversation so I can help you to short track it so that you don't waste a year trying to figure out what thing to do where, because there's my email, Shannon at autism-live.com. I try to be responsive. If you ever email me and I don't get almost immediately right back to you, it means it's been lost somewhere in the crush. Don't be afraid to email me more than once. I apologize if sometimes, things get past me, but I never do it deliberately. Feel free to, as Nancy says, be a dog on a pork chop. Email me and keep emailing me until I respond to you. Okay. Edie, I'm one, says that their 10-year-old won't poop on the toilet. What can we do?
Yeah. So it's, it's one of those things with a lot of kids, not just kids on the spectrum, but a lot of kids develop a fear of the toilet because they wonder, they don't know what's down that hole and they wonder and they worry that either they're going to be sucked in or where do things go? Where is this mysterious hole that sucks things out, And so they get very scared and worried. Other kids are also scared. I mean, some kids, their sensitivity to sound and the flush makes the toilet already a very fear-provoking object, right? So I often suggest to parents to get the toileting process really under control on a potty, like on a plastic potty that can be emptied. You can, if your child is getting older, you can also use the adult ones that are used for seniors. But the concept is that the child needs to see that their poop is there, and then they need to take it and actually empty it so that they have some control over it. that is sort of the process of just trying to acclimate them to the toilet. At the same time, they need to be able to sit on the toilet and stand up, not necessarily have to have a bowel movement, but just become familiar and reduce the fear of falling in. So you kind of have to identify, is the child afraid of falling in which case those little toilet seats that are for kids are very helpful. They're also very comfortable. They also have like decorations on them that a lot of times make our kids a little bit more calm about it. So acclimate your child to the toilet seat, but the actual act of having a bowel movement, use a potty where the child can actually see their poop and empty it. And I find that really, really helps. And then gradually they become so comfortable with the whole scenario that they start using the toilet appropriately.
Yeah, we had to go through all this because I think first of all, the movie Finding Nemo, while it helped us with so many things, I think it freaks a lot of kids out because there's the whole of flushing of the thing down the fish down the toilet, and they're like, they're afraid that they're going to be like the fish and go into the sewer system. Yeah. But I will say, and I want you to take just a second to talk about the reinforcer for pooping on the potty, because for us, that was the thing. You guys sent us to the toy store. Remember when we had big, huge toy stores we could go to back in the good old days? You guys sent us to the toy store with the task to find the toy that he wanted the most. And we would always, in a toy store, I know it's like, how can you even do this now? Like bigger stores, like a Walmart or a Target, but we would have him in the cart and we would put toys in the cart and he would play with it for a few minutes. And then we would take it away and put something else in or put it in the basket. And whatever he came back to like 4 or 5 times or reached for 4 or 5 times, that was the toy that we got. So at the time they had Lego Knights that were these things that came in a canister. And so you guys told us to get a couple of those, and boy, he wanted that. He wanted us to open that canister. He like jumped up and down and he asked for it a million times, and we stuck it up on the towel bar that was opposite the toilet. And we said, as soon as you poop in the potty, then, and he did a dance and then he got on that toilet and nothing would do, but he was going to make a poop in the toilet so that he could have that night. And then he would have the rest. As soon as he pooped in the toilet, he had the night for the rest of the day. Then the night went back in the canister. It went back up on the towel bar, and he would get up in the morning and he would go night. And I would say, poop in the potty. And man, he was like a machine. He was going to make that happen because he wanted that night that badly. Yeah. And I would never have thought to do that, but you guys had us do that. That's not necessarily what's appropriate for all kids, Dr. Granpeesheh, but there does need to be some sort of a meaningful reinforcer for doing it, right?
100%. And thanks for saying that, Shannon, because I focused more on, I think, the kids who have a fear of pooping in the potty. And you focused more on just the process of getting the child to poop on the potty. Like it's a very different thing. If it's not fear oriented, and if it's just a matter of getting the actual process, like getting used to, this is where I poop and I need to do this, and I'm not going to poop in my pants, right? So the process of potty training. Then, and in any case, any behavior that takes place that is a positive behavior, there needs to be a very motivating reward. A lot of times we will tell parents to even put the TV in the bathroom. I mean, you need to make sure that this is highly rewarded. And remember, it's not going to be forever that you're going to have to give them extreme reward. It's just in the beginning when a behavior is being learned, there has to be a lot of reward. Then over time, you can reduce the reward, use the intense reward for other new behaviors. But initially, there has to be a great motivation, and that motivation is built by the value of the reward.
Absolutely. There we go. We got to get to this question. Sadaya says, how to deal with escape behavior. It could be anywhere, any situation. Mostly the escape behavior is that they are not interested in, and that could be a learning experience where the caregiver wants to teach. I'm not 100% sure where we are in that, but escape, when there's lots of times when we see escape maintain behavior where somebody wants to get out of doing something. I think a lot of us think that, it's just elopement, but I engage in escape maintain behavior. It's tax season again. I'm going to do everything I can I will clean my house rather than do my taxes, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you, Shannon, as you know, and you are one of my biggest SDs, discriminative stimulus, for writing this book that I'm working on. But yesterday I engaged in escape behavior, and I used the excuse, it's Valentine's Day, I'm going to be kind to myself.
I love it.
So we all do escape tasks. There's no question about it. The way we go about escaping those tasks is very important, because our kids learn often. And I was reading another one of the previous ones that we answered, I think, was talking about, I think it was Bonnie, who was saying that her son yelled because he couldn't get a sack of sand to be moved. And I was thinking, well, that's like he's trying to get access to something, right? But escape is exactly the same. A lot of times our kids will just scream because they want to avoid a situation. And this is what Sadia is talking about. And Sadia, all you have to do is reduce the learning, make the learning experience a little bit more fun. So make sure it's a shorter instruction and bigger reward, meaningful reward, guys, not rewards that mean something to you, but rewards that mean something to your child. So you're going to make it a very short learning opportunity, like maybe 1 minute, followed by a big reward. And then if he screams or tries to run away, you block it. You don't allow it. And so what you're doing is you are reducing the demand, increasing the reinforcer, and helping shape, model the behavior. So you ask your child to come over, do one very simple task, get a huge reward, and that should work. If they try to escape, that's minimal activity. You prevent them from escaping, and you continue to reward their activity that they engage in with you. You start with as little short of a duration of an activity as you need to. But the important thing is making sure that you do not allow the child to escape, because when they escape, they learn, I can just hit, scream, yell, tantrum, and I'll escape the situation. If you can avoid that even for 30 seconds and then reward the non-escape behavior, you will gradually then be able to build on that. So reduce your baseline, make it as little as possible so that it's successful, and then start building on that. You're mute.
Sorry about that. How Dark Angel wants to know, how can I help my son to play with others? It is a nightmare on the playground. He's pushing other kids, and he will be 4 in 1 week. Happy birthday early.
So could you read that again, Shannon? I couldn't hear you.
How can I teach my son to play with others?
Okay.
It's a nightmare on the playground. He's other kids, and he will be 4 in 1 week, and that's why I said happy birthday.
That's nice. Yeah, so playing with other kids, you guys, is a very, very complex task. It's not something where we just throw the child in there and they're supposed to figure out what to do. It just doesn't happen that way with our kids. So you need to do a number of different things. One is, first of all, on their own, teach them content, teach them skills. That means how to play on playground equipment, how to play with indoor toys of different types. So the child needs to be pretty proficient with, all the things that are on a playground, as well as pretty proficient with objects, toys that his age group will usually engage in or play with. And that means with you, with himself, with you playing, they should be good at it. And then you invite one other child, a neighbor, a cousin, someone, a friend of the family, one other child to come over. The other child should hopefully be maybe a little bit older, maybe much more patient, willing to assist, and then you moderate, or if you have a behaviorist, they moderate the play session. So we do, and basically that means teaching our child how to verbally interact, how to pay attention to the other child, how to take turns. Each of these are individual skills that they need to learn. How to allow the other child to choose the toy or the activity, how to, if they are verbal, how to say positive verbal statements to the other child, how to expand the toy based on the game, based on those verbal things that they say. Hey, let's do 5 more minutes of this. Hey, should we do that now? Those types of sentences. And this whole thing could take 6, 7, 8 months, just these steps that I told you. And then after the child has mastered those things is when you can now just take them to a playground and let them go off with other kids gradually. And still, you should still be there, or someone should still be there to help moderate, right? I don't recommend taking your child when it's super busy. Our kids get very, very overwhelmed with that. And sometimes they get, shoved around, could get hurt because they just don't know what to expect. Even the sound, imagine like if they are sensory sensitive, the activities in the playground could be overwhelming as well. So I really recommend trying to gradually expose your child to calmer environments, like go at different times when there's only a couple of kids there, and shape this behavior. Otherwise it becomes extremely overwhelming for our kids.
Wonderful. I am so sorry that we are out of time for questions, but I'm going to make a pledge to the teaching lady who wrote in something about a yeast belly and about how you get your child to eat vegetables. And also to I Am One, who's written in about what to do during a job interview to be successful. And they talk about masking. So we want to talk about that. I'm going to pledge that we are going to start the next show with those 2 questions. So I'm guaranteeing you, we're going to start the next 2 show with those 2 questions. I do want to thank.
Oh, Shannon, you froze. I'm not sure. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Am I back? Okay. I was saying, I also wanted to say Renee and Elvira were saying thank you so much because you answered their question on TikTok. And I want to let people know, if you can't wait the week for your question to be answered, you can always send in a question to Ask Dr. Doreen on TikTok, and she's answering your questions. And that's kind of super fun, in a super fun format. And you can see the other questions that she's answered there. And here's something super fun. If you heart the other questions that she's answered there, it makes it so that more people find her on TikTok. We just spread the information.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen on the Autism Network. If you're watching us right now, I want to let you know that we have had to pre-record this show because Dr. Granpeesheh had a conflict someplace where she had to be, but we didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. So this is previously recorded, but I, Shannon Penrod, am watching you guys watch the live premiere of this. So please feel free to write in questions and I will be answering and referring questions. And if it's something that you need for Dr. Granpeesheh to answer, I'll be storing them for next week. So but we've got a list of questions that we didn't answer last week and questions that you guys have sent in. So it's going to be great. Hi, Dr. Granpeesheh. How are you?
Good morning, Shannon. How are you?
I'm really good and I'm excited to be here. I want you guys to know that this show is premiering live right now on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook, and it will be available later on today as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's a free download, and we thank you for all of your viewership and for watching in podcasts and reviewing, because you guys have made it #1 autism podcast for the second year running. Appreciative of that and love what you guys are doing to get the word out to other people so that they can come here and hear from a wonderful expert like Dr. Granpeesheh. As you know, if you watch the show, Dr. Granpeesheh has been working in this field for more than 40 years. She really is a true expert in the field of autism. And more than that, she is a compassionate ally to the autism community, fighting for the rights of individuals on the spectrum, for them to be treated as the individuals that they are, to get medical intervention that is appropriate, and to not overlook things and to excuse it and say, oh, well, that's just autism when it's a medical issue. Also helping to give really intentional, empathetic behavioral intervention to help people to be able to learn the skills that they want to and overcome challenges that they have. But of course, we're not talking, I think people get itchy and go, you're talking about changing people. No, this is just about teaching people things that are important to them, not forcing ideology onto people. So love that Dr. Granpeesheh is here with us and that she is donating this time, this hour, to answer your questions. Did I forget it? But we do have to say that there is no expert in this field or any field who could give individual specific advice. So please be writing your questions in a general nature and Dr. Granpeesheh will answer them to the best of her ability. Would you like to say anything, Dr. Granpeesheh?
You can take a deep breath. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Shannon, for that introduction. And it's always a pleasure to receive your questions and do my best to answer them. We have had a lot of questions coming in recently, so I'm kind of happy that we have this opportunity to record, because we never get to all the questions anymore. And if we're not able to answer your questions here, please do go on TikTok. I have my name there is at Ask Dr. Doreen, and I do answer questions there. I will either respond to your questions in the messages, or I will just record an answer to your question when I think that others would be asking the same questions. So please do hit me up there as well. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Wonderful. I'm going to jump right in here because I promised last week that we would start with 2 questions that came in right at the end of the hour. So I'm getting that done right here. I'm living up to that promise. The teaching lady wrote in and said, I have a 3-year-old. He has bad gut health, has to make food changes and move towards veggies, which he hates. How can I introduce veggies without a smoothie option? He has a major yeast belly. Any suggestions?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I don't know, it's very, very, very hard to repopulate the gut with the appropriate bacteria. So when we have yeast issues, often they accompany the destruction of all healthy bacteria, which could have happened in a number of different ways. So when children are young, they often get ill and they're given antibiotics, and those antibiotics will destroy bad bacteria, obviously, but also good bacteria. And unfortunately, when we're not exposed anymore to foods or soil that can provide us the good bacteria, so a lot of times we now have to turn to the use of probiotics and prebiotics. Probiotics are actually small amounts of the good bacteria. And prebiotics are things foods, for instance, that will help us produce more of the good bacteria. The problem is that it is a friend of mine who's a very well-known chemist in this field said one time, using probiotics and prebiotics, it's honestly similar to trying to fill a beach with handfuls of sand. And so it takes a very, very long time. And the environment of the gut isn't necessarily one that promotes the growth of the healthy bacteria. So it's a very difficult process. Let's just put it that way. So my suggestion is, where possible, you get the help of a doctor. Usually there are a lot of kind of Eastern medicine or naturopaths or homeopaths who can help you with this process. And they will put you on very specific diets, as well as a number of different medications that will repopulate your gut. That's one thing. The other thing is you can also get the help of a really good dietitian or nutritionist who will help you with the foods that your child is consuming, because that whole process of yeast and bloating is not just about putting healthy bacteria back in. It is also about reducing or eliminating foods that will increase yeast or that will increase bloating. So there's a lot of different things you have to do. I would say that just to kind of give you some quick answers, uh, foods that are high in sugar or grains will tend to increase, gluten, for instance, will tend to increase yeast pretty fast. So you definitely, dietitians will want to put you on those types of diets that eliminate sugar and grains and many other foods as well that could potentially be growing yeast. There are medications that for treating yeast when you have too much yeast. These can start as basic as nystatin, which is, you can give that to a baby, or you can expand, and your physician might put you on things that are a little bit stronger, like diflucan or Nizoral. There are other anti-yeast antifungal medications that will help. As far as the bloating goes, again, they will do a lot of testing first, but both urine and blood tests, to identify what exactly is going on. I mean, your child could also have overgrowth of bad bacteria. So we need to kind of find out what is going on there before you try to intervene yourself, right? So in terms of a really strong probiotic that I use sometimes and I really like, it is called VSL3. That's kind of my favorite probiotic. But again, I don't suggest that you try to go at this on your own. It is important to have expertise. And Shannon, maybe Trayvon can help us put up kind of the med maps information, because obviously all of these folks, these doctors who are trained with med maps, they're very familiar with these protocols.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, Trayvon, I think that it's medmaps.org,
Yes, I think so.
which is the place that you can go to. And what that is a site that will tell you doctors that have attended conferences that are for medmaps. You're going to need to drill down a little bit more on your own. You don't want to just assume that everybody is created equal there, because each one of those doctors has a specialty. So, they might be somebody who is a homeopathic doctor. Someone might be a pediatrician. There's at least one that I'm aware of that's a really good one. His specialty is sports medicine, but he happens to be a dad of a kid on the autism spectrum. So he has a side practice where he also does this on the side. And his wife helps him to do that because they got very good at this. There are some that are neurologists. There are some that are allergists. They're all different, and they're in all different places all over the country. And some of them, I don't really know the designations, Dr. Granpeesheh. Some of them have been to more conferences, have certified, have done papers. Some of them not. Some of them have only been to one conference. So you really kind of have to do a little bit of your homework. There are some that we're aware of that we particularly like. I think both of us really like Dr. David Berger in Florida, who I just think is the be all end all. But there are many that we've had different contact with, and a lot of these people are really, really truthfully up on the latest research, and they're doing the latest research, that they know things that we wish that everybody knew. So great to have contact with one of those doctors and to have them be looking at things, because you're going to find, I certainly found early on, I had a great pediatrician who was very open to conversation, but said to me, I don't know enough about this, and I'm going to be watching what you do. And I said, can I bring you things and have you look at it and tell me your point of view on them? And we started a relationship that went on for 15 years. My son's I was so sorry to see him go. When my son's 18 years old, he doesn't go to a pediatrician anymore. But we learned a lot from each other, and he was willing to partner with a doctor that was a med map doctor, so that when we were doing any kind of an intervention, that he was on board with it. I think that that's the rare circumstance, though. I got to be honest. I think a lot of pediatricians, they either think they know it all, or they're not interested in knowing anything else, or they say, I don't know anything and I'm not interested in learning anything else. So, but that was ideal, having a med map doctor and having a pediatrician and looking at things. But I think, a lot of times when people find out about, obviously this parent already knows a fair amount, because they use the expression yeast belly. So that tells me that they know a thing or three, right? And I think what's important for all of us to remember is that you're never going to get rid of all the yeast, nor would you want to, that it's all about balancing it for the rest of your life and finding the right mix and getting to the right place. It can be tough, but it's a worthwhile battle. Boy, you will feel better if you start working on this.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And get the whole family involved. I mean, everybody starts eating a little bit better. Everybody starts feeling better. And you find the right level of sleep and water and good veggies and having things that are organic, and it's life-changing. It really is.
That's right.
Okay. Shall we move on to IM1? Because I promised that I would answer their question as well.
Yeah.
IM1 says, I have a job interview coming up soon. How do I mask so that I seem normal, so people can't tell something is off with me, please? And I have to say right out the gate, I always, whenever somebody talks about masking, I want to acknowledge that it's a difficult term for a lot of people. I also want to acknowledge I certainly participate in masking. I'm someone who's neurotypical, but I mask sometimes. I would love to tell people that I'm 100% myself whenever I walk out the door or talk to anybody. That is, and I'm moving towards that. I want to be more authentically myself wherever I am, and be okay with the fact that sometimes people are not okay with that. But it's hard. It's really hard. And I think we all feel a certain need to mask at some times, but I think that their question is a little bigger and a little deeper, and it breaks my heart as a parent.
But thank you for, I love the way you spoke about it, Shannon, and introduced it. And I think we all mask to some degree or another. And I think there's multiple sides to this. I want to kind of try to address all of them. So, it would also be a little bit strange if we didn't mask. Like, I just want to start from that, because part of the reason we mask, I love, there's a series of books, and it talks all about like how we grow, the taming of us as we become adults, right? And if we didn't mask, I'm not sure that we would be following social norms or social rules. I think part of us, not being 100% ourselves is simply that we've had to learn to adhere to what society expects of us, right? So, I will tell you that I'm like a much more casual and jovial type of person than I am when I attend board meetings, right? As an example, every environment teaches us its own rules, right? Like you go to, and if you think about it, if you go to a baseball field, you're going to behave very differently than if you go to a library. And that's masking, right? That is controlling some aspects of yourself in order to fit in. Now, for someone who's asking this question and they're very astute and aware and concerned about the symptoms associated with autism, I want to try to help you not see it as something that is standing out, but just see it as you know what, here are a set of rules that have to do with society, and I kind of need to adhere to these rules. Focus on the external more than the internal. You don't want to focus on how do I change myself. You want to focus on, okay, like, you know, in a work setting or in a job, you know, interview, I have to be polite. So I need to be, you know, address the individual in a manner that it shows that I am polite. I need to be on time. I need to be focused on the person who's talking to me. I can't be distracted at that time. I need to listen and respond. I need to give that person adequate time to say all the things. So I can't interrupt them, for instance. So focus more on just typical behaviors that are expected of us during a job interview, and less focused on, you know, what if I tap my finger? Don't worry about things like that. As long as you do the traditional kind of appropriate behaviors for a job interview, which I promise you can even look up online,
Yeah.
I think it's always better to focus on that. And so it's always better to focus on things to do rather than things not to do. Right.
Yes.
So, and that allows you to continue to be yourself, but just behave appropriately in the setting.
You know, what's interesting, I think about last week was Valentine's Day. And if there was somebody that you cared about, whether it was as a friend or as someone, a romantic partner, you know, one of the things that we learn as we get to know people is what their love language is. And that some people, you know, you have a friend that they're about the gift. If you show up to their birthday and you don't have a gift, they're decimated, right? There are
Yeah.
other people who could care less.
Right.
Like my husband has learned that for me on Valentine's Day, don't show up with chocolate. I'm allergic to chocolate. Like that
Yeah.
is just a disaster. And don't, you know, for my husband, listen, I love getting flowers. I don't have a thing about flowers, but it's not my love language. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I love to get them from friends, but not from my husband. It's not like a big romantic thing for me. There's other stuff. And my son knows, boy, he writes a poem for mom and that's everything. That's
Yeah.
everything. He doesn't have to spend money on me. If he writes me a poem, I'm over the moon, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's kind of the same thing in a job interview that, you know, my son doesn't change who he is to give me a gift, but when he gives me the gift, he's thinking about what will make me happy. And in a job interview, if you think about it and think, okay, what are the kinds of things that make these people happy? I'm going to dish it up
Absolutely.
because I want something from them. But I guess I just really, I hate for people to feel like they can't be themselves. Or I think the phrase here that breaks my heart, I am one, is that you saying that something that you don't want people to look at you and tell that something is off. I think that's the part that my heart is breaking over, because
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you at all. You're perfect and you're wonderful, but we all know that there's a hoop of fire that you have to get through to get the interview. And I think you know that, and I think that's what you're asking about. But if we can put it in that context of, here are the 10 things that they're looking for, and Dr. Granpeesheh just went through some of them. So I'm going to do those things just because that is the context of what we're doing right now. In a job interview, you do these 10 things and then you are successful. Just like, you know, when you give someone, you maybe don't like chocolate, like I give people chocolate, but I don't like chocolate, but I know what's going to make them happy. So you serve up the thing that people want to do that. But I'm sending them a hug, and I know that there are places all around the country now that are working on just these skills. Our dear departed Joanne Lara used to do with Autism Works. They used to do classes where they would do practice interviews. They would videotape themselves. The whole class would watch it back and give each other pointers and go, oh, did you see where you didn't quite do the thing there? And work on it, rehearse it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm all about rehearsal.
Absolutely. And so, you know, one of the things that you learn kind of as a psychologist, just helping people who have anxiety, not necessarily on this spectrum, but just people who have anxiety, what you never want to tell the person to just cut their own behaviors or curtail or worry about this, that, or the other thing. You want to kind of get the person more focused on something outside of themselves. And I think that it is important for you to just be who you are. You don't need to change that. And just focus on those types of things that are expected of everyone in a job interview. And don't worry about anything else, because bottom line, you don't want to mask to the point where when you get the job, you have to act like someone else. You know, you want to be able to be yourself. I tell people all the time, the biggest thing about a job is that you should enjoy it. You spend so much time in the job that it is important that you enjoy it and that you can actually be yourself. But that also doesn't mean, breaking the rules of society. To a large extent, we all kind of have to adhere to those rules. And, fortunately, the rules are changing. The rules are becoming much more flexible. The rules are becoming much more agreeable to individuals on the spectrum. People are more aware and able to produce environments that are tolerable. So, I think that things are changing in both ways, but I don't want you to worry about who you are. I think that in psychology, we refer to this as the state versus the trait. Whatever traits you have, you keep those traits. That's who you are. It doesn't matter. You're in a state where you might need to curtail some behaviors or act a certain way, but it doesn't touch who you really are.
I love that. This is one of the many reasons why we love you, Dr. Granpeesheh. I want to move on to another question that came into us on our live, on our website. This is a young man who is 20. He does not identify whether he is also on the spectrum, but he says that a special needs person, and he doesn't know what their diagnosis is, has a crush on him at work. He identifies himself as a 20-year-old male, and the person who has the crush on him is a 35-year-old male. He says he won't leave me alone. When I started the job back in August, I would push carts in the parking lot, and even then he would stick to me like glue. I now work as a cashier in the store, but he still hangs around me, helping me by bagging people's stuff, even though I didn't ask him to. At first, I didn't mind him and was nice to him, but now he thinks we're best friends and follows me to my car when we're leaving. When I'm leaving. Every time we see each other around, he always says hi, even if we literally just did this 30 seconds before. He always tells me to pull my mask down so he can see my face and asks to hang out outside of work. What really makes me uncomfortable now is that sometimes when saying bye to each other, he says, I love you. Quietly, but I can still hear him, and he tries to go for physical contact. I even spot him watching me when I'm in my car on my break. I try ignoring him, but I can't really do that when he's breathing down my neck. I don't know if I should be direct with him and tell him to leave me alone, because I'm not sure if I'll get written up or fired for being mean to him, because that has happened here before. And I don't know the details. I really wish I was never nice to him in the first place, because I kind of brought this upon myself. I also don't know what kind of disability he has. And this just breaks my heart all over the place. I so appreciate the fact that this person wrote in, and I hope that you've got some good information for them, Dr.
I do. And I first of all, I just want to say I'm so happy, thankful, Shannon, that we have a place where someone like this could write in.
Yes.
There's a lot I want to tell you. And there's many different sides to this. So let's talk about that. To begin with, I get the impression that you feel you are being harassed. And when you have a fear of being written up or fired for just protecting yourself or defending your own situation or your own existence, your area, your territory, your sense of safety, security, that's called harassment.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it sexual harassment, but it is harassment, and no one should ever be exposed to that. So first of all, you do not want to be in a situation where you fear or you're allowing this person to do things that make you uncomfortable, because just because you're afraid that you're going to lose your job. So Let's just start right there. Now, of course, so if it was any other person, if it wasn't a person with a disability, I guess you would at this point have talked to HR, which would be the right thing to do, your human resources department. And you would have said, this individual is making me feel very intimidated, afraid, uncomfortable, whatever it is. And you would describe everything that you just told us. And then HR would go and talk to this individual and would tell them they can't do the following things. And then hopefully that would resolve it. And that's how things work. At any job, there's always an HR representative, and this is how things are meant to be. Now, you're very compassionate because you feel like, oh, there's something, I should be more careful about this because this is someone with a disability, and how do I actually handle it? And that's nice of you, and that's very kind of you. And there are two things I want to tell you about that. One is that you still go to HR, you still talk to HR, and you tell them the way you feel. And you explain to them that you feel uncomfortable and that you feel like this person is staring at you, stalking you, following you, telling you on lower volume, I love you, trying to touch you. These are things that anyone would start to feel uncomfortable about. And if once you've told HR that, they will either know how to deal with it. In other words, it's possible that you come from an HR department, you have an HR department where they've received some training and they know how to handle this particular disability. And it's possible that they don't, in which case the best scenario is if you and your HR rep together learn about how to best manage this type of behavior. Now I'm going to go back and be on the other side of the individual with disability for a minute. And I want to say that, for instance, if this individual has autism, okay, they are not going to be able to read what's making you uncomfortable. They're going to have a very hard time with this concept of taking another person's perspective. And they will not be offended if you are direct with them. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're direct with someone on the spectrum, it's not like you go to them and say, leave me alone. Leave me alone is too broad of a statement. And the person will think like, oh my God, I can't even interact with this person anymore. No, you detail exactly what it is. So what you would do, now this is with the blessing of HR, with an HR department that has some education about this. The way that it would be handled is they would assign someone to this individual who can guide the individual every day for 5 minutes in the day, either in the morning or at the end of the day. And they will give them very specific rules. Like, for instance, it's not appropriate to ask other people to remove their masks so that you could see their face. That makes people uncomfortable. That's one lesson. And another lesson would be, it's not okay to follow people to their cars, because when you do that, people feel afraid. You don't do that anymore, even if you like the person. Another feedback would be, it could be intimidating or scary for someone if you say, I love you, and they're not in a relationship with you. So each of those individual things, or like, you don't go and help this person bag. It's not your job to do that. You go and do your job. And they teach the person. So the ideal scenario would be that, because you now have assistance from someone in the HR department to help you feel protected. And the individual is actually learning how to be a better employee and how to not make other people uncomfortable, because then going forward, they will have the opportunity to actually have a job. And, I hate it, Shannon, when everybody avoids the subject, because this person is now not learning how to improve their behavior as well. And they might lose a lot of future opportunities because of that. So that's kind of the best way to deal with it. And hopefully you have a good HR department that can manage it. But as far as you're concerned, you definitely need to go talk to HR and get their guidance, because you are an employee there. And listen, if they fire you or write you up, there's a million other steps you take. But most HR departments will not do that, and they will guide you and hopefully advise you how to handle the situation better.
Yeah, I so appreciate what you said, Dr. Granpeesheh. This whole thing about let's avoid the subject, let's not say anything, let's excuse it because the person has a disability. I find that never is helpful to anyone. And, not everybody agrees with me, though. I often, when we're not in COVID, go to events. And I have many friends who are adult self-advocates on the spectrum and will be in a social situation and something will invariably happen, as it does, no matter if it's all neurotypical people or a nice mix. But what I love is that the people who are on the spectrum will come up to me and say, this just happened. Did I just say something inappropriate? Whereas people who are neurotypical, it doesn't occur to them, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't even occur to them. They just go on with their day. But I love that people who are on the spectrum will often, not everybody, but they'll say they'll say something's going on, and I'm not reading the room, and they'll often ask me because they know I'll tell them the truth, and I'll go, yeah, you could have said this or you could have said that, and maybe let's think about what are they feeling right now because you said this, so that they can go and repair it. And I forget, though, that people don't always know there's a good friend of mine who not that long ago said something inappropriate on a Facebook post. And I responded and said, that's not an appropriate thing to ask. And then a mom wrote to me and said, I don't know if you're aware of the fact that he's on the spectrum. And so then I took the conversation to the side, which is what I should have done to begin with. But the person on the spectrum was like, oh, Shannon, thank you so much, because I didn't know that was an inappropriate question to ask.
Yeah.
Right. But the mom who was not the mom of the person who asked, mom of another kid on the spectrum, said, Shannon, I don't think you realize that he's on the spectrum. You can't tell him something was inappropriate. And I had to go to her on the side and say, no, that is the relationship he and I have. He asks me to tell him, but you're right. I probably shouldn't have done it as publicly as I did. But he was like, oh, thank you. I didn't know that was an inappropriate question.
Yeah.
So, it's all something, right? Okay. I gotta move on to a poop wiping question, because that is the glamour that is this job. So, somebody wrote in and said, hello, I watch your show every week and I love it. And thank you. We love you too. I know you've previously addressed proper wiping for an 8-year-old, but I have an 8th grader that still does not do it correctly. We have tried many reward systems, but it's just a matter of time before they stop working. He understands how, and when we talk about it, he just says he's being lazy. He is in regular ed with friends and after-school activities, and I can smell it as soon as he gets home. I'm scared he will be teased and cannot believe he hasn't already. He also struggles with other areas of personal hygiene. It is 8th grade. I'm gonna say that. Teeth and showering. He will go weeks without brushing his teeth, says it's unnecessary, and throws tantrums on shower day. Again, have tried rewarding him after completion. Why are these tasks so difficult for him? Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. P.S. He has typically developing younger and older brothers that model proper hygiene for him. But how do we make him care? Can I tell you, I used to teach 7th and 9th grade English, and let me tell you, those boys are fragrant. And it is a phase. It is a phase. But we want to make sure that we get through it with as little of problem as possible. But ask any 7th, 8th, or 9th grade teacher, and they will tell you, like, you would like for your nose to take a vacation.
Absolutely. And it is tough because, it sounds like he's so high functioning that he's kind of like in the mix, right? And I hate to say this, but behavior change occurs due to 2 things. One is positive reward for good behavior, and one is negative consequences for something that's challenging or bad. So, he's very, very lucky that he has older and younger brothers who are modeling for him. Have you tried to see what happens if one of the brothers says something like, you stink, I wouldn't want to play with you. I know it's a very mean statement, but at the same time, it is the natural consequence. And what you're doing is, if you are afraid that he is like not wiping to the point that he smells and you're worried that other kids are about to comment on it, then I would much rather have one of his brothers give him that consequence under which he would then be nurtured to continue to clean himself rather than a peer actually making fun of him. Because, as Shannon said, I don't think it's going to happen this year because, like, eighth grade, I know, and maybe even ninth grade, a lot of the boys are going to be pretty gross. But 10th grade and stuff, because actually what happens, I think, Shannon, is that boys start to develop an interest in girls.
Yep.
And as soon as that happens, they start to be cleaner and take better care of themselves. So, I think the natural consequence of one of his brothers just kind of messing around with it, and they can do it to each other as well and say, hey bud, did you take a shower? Just like kind of making it more light as opposed to a very strict rule that exists that he's going to. Because one of the things that, Shannon, that I found has happened with our very, very higher functioning kids is they kind of get sick and tired of rules. And they actually want to go against the rule because they're tired of being told what to do, and they see themselves as higher functioning and therefore not, and all teens obviously are this way as well. So I think things might come across a little bit easier if you have one of the brothers kind of just comment on it and then say, oh yeah, or maybe have one brother comment to the other brother, hey dude, you smell. And then the other brother says, I'm going to go wipe better, or I'm going to go shower. Some sort of modeling of that behavior might go further.
Absolutely. I've got so many questions to pick here, but I kind of have to go to this one because it's been eating at me. The parent says, I feel so bad about this. Should I though? So my son gets in-home therapy and he actually really loves it. However, a while back, I had to tell the main lady at the office that one woman really wasn't working out. She was a really cool person, but she wasn't actually doing anything with my son, but sitting there and playing on her phone. So I said it wasn't working. No big deal. Now, though, he has 3 that come over and he loves them and they play with him. And we've seen great strides in many aspects of his life. Well, they just included a 4th person, and to be quite frank, she's rude and disrespectful to my whole household. She's been there several instances over the past 2 weeks, but the ones that really got to me were, one, first and foremost, the way she talks to my son. She's very rude to him and says insensitive things. She rolls her eyes at him and makes a point to show him that he's irritating her. Just very unprofessional, not cool at all. 2, she told her boss that my house was dangerous. It's not. Yes, it can be a bit messy, but I also have 2 other children and I'm in my 3rd trimester of being pregnant. So, there are no dangers at all. 3, she judges my other children and makes statements on their behavior. Like, I would never let my children act like that. Wow, somebody needs to learn manners. I'm actually very proud of how well my children act. Not taking credit for it. They're just pretty good kids. It's mentioned on a regular basis when we go out. I mean, 1 is 4, 1 is 8, and 1 is 9. They don't act super crazy, but they are kids nonetheless. The first time they were arguing about who was going to be which doll, and the other time my sister, my oldest wasn't super enthralled with a book I picked up for her. So she was like, oh, thanks. Anyway, I don't want to seem stuck up or anything, but genuinely feel judged by this lady. So I told the office lady again that it wasn't going to work. Didn't give the examples of instances, but I said, I was sorry. We really want to keep him in therapy. He loves it and needs it. I don't know. I just feel like, how is she going to help if nobody in my house is cool with her? And I love this question because I think this happens, all the time in homes where parents go, this person isn't going to really work out for a reason. They go to the office and they say, so we just don't want this person. And they don't give reasons why. And then the next person comes and is twice as bad as the last person. And they go, yeah, we don't want this person either. And you and I both know what happens then. Then the parent gets labeled as somebody who's picky and finicky and doesn't really want their child to do therapy, which is not what we're hearing from this parent. So help us all here, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Yeah.
What should a parent be doing when things like this are happening?
Yep. And I will tell you that even kind of, Shannon, when I was running CARD, as CEO, right? It doesn't happen very often that you hear about all of these types of things because you're running a big organization. But when I used to hear about these things, I would often get pretty upset on behalf of the parent. Like, I feel what happens, unfortunately, is that there's an operations manager or there's like an office lady, whatever their title is at whatever company, and they are not a clinician usually. So they're not really concerned about, what is the best fit in this household? How do I make life easier for this parent? All of the things that the clinical staff is supposed to actually care about, right? Is that we're here. I mean, every ABA organization says that they're there to make your life easier by helping and teaching your child. So clearly, in this case, that's not happening. Clearly, in this case, this individual is actually adding stress to your family, stress to you, which isn't okay. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. Sometimes you will have an operations person or an office manager who might actually become vindictive if you go in and complain about a couple of therapists. But here's how I would do it. I would list all the exact issues, like you just gave us pretty good examples. But like, take the time to list some of those issues and say, I don't like how she talks to my other children. Here are 3 examples. I don't like the way that she judges us. Here are 3 examples of things she says. I don't like the way she talks to my child. Here are 3 examples. And take those to the office manager and just say, these are the reasons that I don't think this is going to work. Now, you could also, and this depends on your personality, a lot of times as parents, we kind of want to avoid more confrontation and stuff than we have. Like, it's just enough, right? I mean, the world, there's enough on our plates that we don't want to deal with this. But some parents will come to the office manager and say, these are some of my issues. I'm happy to work with this person and tell them, don't talk to my child this way. Don't talk to my other kids this way. Don't make me feel judged. I'm happy to do all that. But I want you, office person, to know this is where I'm coming from. And the office person will either tell you, yeah, go right ahead, or no, we're going to actually put this in this individual's file and we're going to teach them. Now, this goes back to the whole concept of how important it is to give other people the opportunity to improve. Like, you are actually, by going to the office person, they will potentially either teach this person, they'll write them up, they'll tell them what's right and what's wrong, and they'll teach them, in which case you've now saved the next family from this type of behavior, or they'll go and reprimand the person and the person will quit, in which case, good, because this type of person shouldn't be in this field anyway. So there's nothing you're doing wrong here. You definitely need to defend yourself and your child. That is the most important thing here, your children. Whoever walks into your home needs to adhere to your rules. And you know what, if the ABA company doesn't give you therapists and they drop you, who cares? There's so many ABA companies nowadays. You cannot have someone in there who's not doing the right thing or is just making you feel bad. Just reading those things, made my blood boil. So you shouldn't put up with it.
Can I say, though, that on the flip side, because I think a lot of times we're so worried about what they think of us, and she's got 3 therapists that are great.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I always would say to parents is, for every time you complain, make sure that you're doing 2 things to compliment.
Yeah.
So for the 3 therapists that are rock stars, what I would be doing is having all of your kids sit down and draw cards and the older kids write a poem or something, and you write a really wonderful note and say, I just want, Jacob to know how meaningful he is in our lives, and give that to, go in and say, here's what we did with these three, because these are the three therapists that are doing remarkable, so that you're constantly also praising where it's appropriate and not always complaining. Because Dr. Granpeesheh, I don't know how much you were aware, but I was a problem parent.
Yeah, you were at the same time loved by so many, Shannon. So that's
well,
the
I
point
tried to remember to compliment when appropriate, so that when I complained, and I also would say, what can I do to help? I did this at school. I got marked right away as the difficult parent. And I said, how can I volunteer to be on the PTA? And they said, well, you can run the bake sale. And I said, hey, I'm happy to run the bake sale. I'm not going to be good at that. Do you have a play you need directed? And they went, oh, as a matter of fact, we do. And then for years I directed the play. And then I would go in and before rehearsal and I would say, does anybody need anything copied? I was constantly sucking up. Because if you're going to be a complainer, you got to balance it with other things. And I would write letters of recommendation for teachers who were good. So what happened is that people who were doing a good job suddenly wanted to be on my kids' team.
That's right.
Because they knew they were going to get letters of recommendation from me. So I say be a squeaky wheel, but also be the person who's buttering everybody's bread. As whenever somebody's doing something good, you be the first person to say it out loud and draw it on a card and give it to them.
Exactly.
Because heaven knows those people need to be rewarded. If you've got 3 therapists that are doing a kick butt job,
awesome.
I would be rewarding those 3. And I'll tell you what'll happen. You'll end up getting a 4th therapist who's better.
Mm-hmm.
But don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. All right, now we got to move to something that's super not fun. Hello, please. They want to remain anonymous. We don't ever say anybody's names. But they're saying that their son is 9 years old, on the spectrum, and lately he's been acting different sexually. Mm-hmm. He acts out physically, grinding. And at first I thought he was exploring, but now he seems to call names. He says nasty words and he wants me to kiss him or push his head down. I'm not married at this time and no man is coming to my house for him to see this behavior. He visits his dad every single day, and I have asked Dad if he has anything to say about that, and the dad says that he doesn't see anything like that. I am so confused. Is this normal? Should I be concerned?
Oh God. I hate to say this, but yeah, I would be concerned. I work with some parents who have seen this kind of change in behavior, and it inevitably ends up being an adult who is somehow taking advantage of the child, or the child is seeing an adult take advantage of another child. And sometimes this happens at school. Sometimes it happens at other environments where you are not present. I don't know, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but I do think that it would be important to investigate. How do you investigate? I'm not sure. I mean, at this point, I think you need to get a professional involved, a child psychologist, who will then write down all of these issues and will document what is happening, and will then be able to pull Dad in, and either Dad will become your partner in trying to find out what possible environment this could be happening, or he will not, in which case he will also be investigated. I think you do need to get a psychologist involved, though, so that if there is need for a formal report or a police investigation, they can be the one who is reporting, because they are a mandated reporter. And so, but yes, to answer your question, when you see with a child changes in their sexual behavior or things like pushing their head down, so on, that is concerning to me.
Yeah. I want to say to you, because I have a friend who's been through this, that I really want to encourage you to do what Dr. Granpeesheh has said. But what I want you to do first, for just one hot minute, is, check your house and everything and make sure that your house is all in order. Because as you start to report this and raise flares for people, as Dr. Granpeesheh said, they're going to start to investigate. And one of the first things that they're going to want to do is come over to your house and make sure that your child is safe in your house. Don't create other problems for yourself. Make sure that your house is in order. And don't be afraid of having them come into your house and talk to your child. And remind, if anybody gets all weird with you, remind them, I'm the person who asked for this. I'm putting my child's needs first. I want you, to talk to them and to do whatever. But so don't be afraid of them coming investigating you. But I'm just telling you that someone will come to your house and look, and we want that. We want people to have the child be their client, that they're looking to make sure that the child is safe, right? But don't kid yourself. They're also going to look at you. So just mentally prepare yourself for that, and don't think that that's weird. That means they're doing their jobs.
And actually, now that you bring that up, Shannon, another thing that you should do before anything else is videotape as many of these behaviors as you possibly can. Record him doing these things more than once, and so that you have the documentation.
There you go. But please get your child help. Listen, I don't know where exactly you start looking, but there are laws in place that say that things like you can't send a tape recorder to school, you can't do all kinds of things, and of course we would never tell you here to do anything that is illegal. But I will tell you that I've seen a lot of parents who feel that for the safety of their child, by accident drop a tape recorder into the child's pocket that runs all day long, and that they check it when they come home, and they're willing to get fined or whatever when they come forward with evidence that was obtained illegally to save their child. I would not encourage you to do that, but just putting it out there that some people do. Okay, let's shift to something that's different here, but also concerning. Good morning. My almost 11-year-old has high functioning ASD. One of our biggest challenges is his false, exaggerated memories of events. They're always negative, never positive. For example, we will bring him to basketball, which he loves, and he's always excited to go. And he will report how awful practice was and how much he hates it and how we make him do things he hates. But then 2 days later, he's back to being excited to go to practice and runs inside. He does this for most activities. If we try to challenge his memories with facts from the coaches and teachers, he says that they are lying. It's like he enjoys being miserable and feeling put upon. This has been going on for as long as I can remember. We are very relaxed and never make him do things. If he's anxious about a game, we and the coach tell him it's okay to sit out. But he will go and complain after that we want him to be a professional athlete and get very angry and upset with us. What can we do to help him remember events actually and also accurately, and understand that he's under no pressure from us to participate in anxiety-provoking events? Seems more than black and white thinking, like his memories are distorted and he doesn't hear us when we tell him it's okay to not go to games. Thank you so very much. I love the show, and I always learn something to help my son.
That's so nice. I always love reading these questions, Shannon, because it's such a sample of how we perceive things differently and how we see the things differently. Like, just listening to that, I see that the parent is thinking that the child actually is not remembering positive experiences. And honestly, I wouldn't have thought about it that way. To me, it's more like he might have gotten used to the attention and interaction that he gets from saying negative things about an activity, not that it was actually negative. Like, I don't know that he actually has a bad time, because if he did have a bad time, I would think he probably won't want to go back. but it sounds like he wants to go back. He just enjoys the bickering about it afterwards, which is, I think, is the portion we need to deal with.
And don't we all have a friend on Facebook that this is true for? That they go to the grocery store, and you could go to the grocery store with them and it's a pleasant experience, but they come home and they Facebook about the one thing that went wrong on it. And then 12 people come on and comment and say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And they get all this attention from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to deal with this is to actually not interact. And I'm guessing that what happens is he'll say something like negative about basketball practice, and then you as parents are trying to convince him that that didn't actually happen, or that you're trying to remind him of all the positive stuff. So there's that period of being engaged with him during this process where he's just complaining. Do not engage with him. Let him complain. Don't engage with him at all. And do the reverse. So whenever he or anyone else says something positive about an experience, then engage, right? And you can model this for him. In other words, he's talking about basketball, he's saying something bad, and you and dad are, or you and the other parent are in the car, and one of you says, hey, wasn't it great that blah, blah, blah happened at basketball? And then you guys talk about it. So he will gradually start to realize that only positive comments will result in ongoing attention. Negative comments are not going to get attention, especially because you guys are there and you know that nothing negative is actually happening. He just likes the complaint about it later, right? And you can also teach him, by the way, to on other subjects, not just activities, but things that he likes, objects. If he says a nice thing about it, then heavily give him attention, engage with it, and gradually you will start to teach him that positive comments get a lot of attention. Negative comments don't get that much attention. And that's kind of, I think, the way to turn this around. I would be very interested to hear more, because there is this whole other side of teaching our kids to deal with scenarios that provoke anxiety. But this just doesn't sound like that to me, because he keeps going back to it.
I love it. I love it. And so do us a favor, try this out, and then write us back and let us know if you see a change. I so appreciate that. And we still didn't get through all the questions, and we're still out of time. But I want to thank Dr. Granpeesheh for being here. I want you guys to know that we'll be back live next week, and we'll be back live tomorrow as well. But don't forget that you can always write in, your questions to Dr. Granpeesheh on TikTok. She's answering questions right now on TikTok. You just send your question in, and that's a really fun way to connect with her. Please also see some of the other questions that she's answered on TikTok, because maybe she's already answered a question that's very similar to yours. And we love it when you give her hearts and things on TikTok. You know what that does? It not only reinforces Dr. Granpeesheh, we have to remember to do that, right? She deserves that. But it also, puts it into a category where more people get exposed to it. And so you're helping other people to find the information that they were looking for that they may not even know they're looking for. So please check her out on TikTok. And thank you so much, Dr. Granpeesheh. This time is so valuable. I just so enjoy hearing your answers to these things. She's remarkable. And I last week when we were watching the show, Dr. Granpeesheh, you just were so on point last week. Can I just say? And even I was sitting watching and I was like, am I allowed to fangirl? This woman is amazing. You are amazing. So I'm thrilled that you're here, and she's going to be answering questions that you guys sent in. And we do have to say, though, that there is no expert who can give individual specific advice in this format. You're going to send in information. She's going to respond to it and maybe have more questions for you to go back and ask the expert that has eyes on the situation. And you guys have written in and said how helpful she is. She's going to give you lots of information. You're going to take that, go back to the expert in your area, and use it in the way that you best see fit. So those are sort of the rules. because as amazing as she is, she's not in your home. She doesn't have eyes on the situation or the person, and it's unfair to assume either on their side or her side that she does. So did I leave anything out, Dr.
No,
Granpeesheh?
that's perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. And hopefully we'll be able to give some helpful suggestions today.
Okay, we're going to wade in with tough stuff, right? We're not shirking from the tough stuff here. We're going to start with a person who's written in and said, for some context, I live in a basement apartment with my husband and our dog, who, as well as being a service animal, loves kids and is very mild-mannered. We have been having issues with our upstairs neighbors since November in regards to loud stomping, furniture being slammed, and loud screaming. I have been up to talk to them about it several times, and last night I reached my breaking point. I went upstairs to ask them to please stop stomping, as my husband works early and was trying to sleep for work. When she opened the door, I could see that the small 2-bedroom apartment had no less than 6 adults and 4 kids inside of it. I calmly asked them to stop the stomping, and since this is the 3rd time I have had to ask in the last 4 months, the next time it got this bad, I would be lodging a complaint with the property management company. My neighbor had a friend over who has a 3-year-old who is on the spectrum and was the one stomping the hardest and causing most of the noise. Her friend gives a sour look on her face and started chirping at me from across the room. The friend said, "You live in a basement apartment and he has autism. What the heck do you expect me to do? There's going to be some noise." And then our person responded back with, "Okay, I get that I live in a basement apartment, but stomping until picture frames fall off the walls is a different story." And the friend said, "Well, he has autism. What the heck?" And I'm saying heck, that's not what they said. "What the heck do you expect me to do?" And our person said, "Put some slippers on him, or maybe secure some pillows to his feet. If absolutely has to stomp his feet, lay him on the sofa and kick the back of it, or let him kick the wall if he needs to kick something hard." And the friend got all exasperated and sighed and said, "Well, he likes dinosaurs and he gets excited when he sees them. And when he gets excited, he stomps his feet." So our person said, "Then don't show him a movie with dinosaurs." And the friend snorted and said, "You just don't get it. He has autism." And our person said, "No, I get it. I work with kids with special needs for the last 3 years. I work with a kid who loves to stomp. And when he needed to, I would wrap his feet in foam and let him go to town on a sound dampening mat I picked up for him to stomp on." And that person said, "Well, I guess he can quiet it down a bit. I want to be a good neighbor, but this is excruciating." They're saying to us, "Please help." Lots there.
Yeah.
Sounds like almost World War III and between the apartment mates. Where do you want to start?
But I mean, I want to start by saying, like, what? And I think this is kind of a nice neighbor, actually. I mean, it's very thoughtful, I think, to write in to our show and ask for some
Yes.
feedback, and to, not to actually turn this into a war, right? And I think, I'll be honest, my feeling is you've given them some pretty good suggestions right there. Like, like, I wouldn't have even have thought about, like, wrap his feet in foam and let him do it that way. Like, these are pretty good suggestions, and I feel like you are actually being sympathetic to what's going on. It is difficult. There's no question that when you have a child who has autism, has some sensory issues going on, a lot of times kids will express their excitement by jumping up and down, and that sort of stuff can be very difficult for neighbors. There's no question about it. I am generally of the mind that you can always take a child's most preferred behavior and turn it into a reinforcer, use it as a reinforcer. So, in this case, for instance, if he likes dinosaurs, I really would then take that activity, whatever the activity is that involves dinosaurs, outside maybe, and let him run around and enjoy it somewhere else. There are things that we can do to modify or shape the behavior of our kids. And I think this downstairs neighbor has kind of handled it in a pretty nice way, I would say. What do you think, Shannon?
I do. What's funny for me is I've been on both sides of this equation.
Yeah.
I've been on the equation where I've had my kid who, for whatever reason, somebody was asking for him to stop being himself, and that's hard. And I've been on the side where I've been the person saying, you can't just expect everybody in the world. Listen, I think we all know parents within the, and I always say, I love all autism parents. I do. But there are some autism parents that their child, it doesn't matter what behavior they engage in, they could hit your child. And if you say, hey, that's not okay, they'll say, well, he has autism. What do you expect me to do?
Right.
And I'm of the mindset of, well, no, that's not acceptable. Your child is going to end up institutionalized if we don't. You can't just allow them to slap my child and say, well, he has autism.
Yeah.
That's not on the list of symptoms, of criteria for autism. That is, I understand that there's a lot more happening there, but you can't just be like, oh, that's what happens, and go, what do you expect either?
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. And I have to say that, you can take any other disorder, and just put it in the same situation. And then I'm sure people will kind of agree with us. Because if you think about it, like I was just actually talking to one of my kids who has a roommate with certain mental health issues. And we were talking about the fact that, you want to be very empathetic or sympathetic to these kinds of situations. But at the same time, everybody has to also sort of take care of themselves and take care of their own personal space and their own rights and all that sort of stuff. And so there has to be a two-way dialogue there, even if there's a mental health issue ongoing, right? And with autism in particular, you made a really, really good point, Shannon, which is that these challenging behaviors are not a part of the diagnosis, right? Even if they were, but they're not. They're a side effect of not being able to communicate. And when we make excuses, like when we say, oh, he has autism, so therefore it's okay for him to do whatever behavior that in other conditions we would not allow him. If he didn't have the diagnosis, we would not allow him. What we're doing is we're essentially allowing the child to think that it is okay to have this challenging behavior in his life. And whether it's this neighbor or the next person who interacts him, or a school teacher or a child at school or an adult when he's older, eventually in his life, he will come across people who are just not going to be accepting of this, whatever it may be. And that's all that, with autism, with anything else, we all have to work towards fitting into the social norm, right? We just have to, because it's one society that we are living in. And there are certain accommodations that can be made. For instance, I love the fact that for autism, we now have sensory sensitive movies. I think that's an amazing, easy accommodation and beautiful. I just think what a wonderful thing to do. And we only do that in this country. And I think it's fabulous, right? That's an easy accommodation to be made. But then there are other accommodations which just can't be made because they're intrusive upon someone else's rights to life, the similar rights. And so as much as I really encourage everyone to be, in fact, this week I did a couple of videos on TikTok about just the fact that kids with autism are very socially isolated. And if you come across someone, just be kinder, make an attempt to make a difference in their life. It's not a very hard thing to do. So I very much encourage people to be more sympathetic and more helpful. But at the same time, I feel like, as parents, we have an obligation to make sure our kids are not disturbing others wherever possible. And sometimes it's just very difficult. But, in this particular case, I think some accommodations could be made.
Absolutely. I think as you were talking, what I realized is that everybody has their line, right? I think it's hard when you say things like, well, to a certain degree, you have to adhere to what society says. I know a part of me goes, I'm not sure, because where is the line? Because I personally feel like if my child has free time and it's his free time and he wants to do this in
Mhm.
his free time, then to me he's not hurting anybody, and he should, if that's what he wants to do with his free time, he should be allowed to do that. And when we hear that, you know, someone's like, well, it's disruptive to the other kids, I want to go, get over it, right?
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but at a certain point, when you're stomping so much that picture frames are coming off the wall,
Mhm.
for me, the line has been crossed, but I think the line is different for everybody.
That's true. There's no question. There's going to be a back and forth with what is actually disruptive to others. And honestly, if a child is quietly doing something in his own corner, it is not disruptive to others. Let's just face it, right? Now, I would have a different issue with the child doing this in his free time. It's not about being disruptive. It's just about like giving the child something more productive to do.
Yeah.
But that is a completely different thing. And I agree with you. I think, and that's why I said when we first started, I think the neighbor, the person who's writing into us, is actually being very kind of considerate in the
Yes.
sense that they're making some suggestions and they're coming to us and asking, like, what else can I do here? Can you make,
Yeah.
help me, because I want to be I want to be a good neighbor. And I think that's really good. That's all we need, is people having good intent, and then
Yeah.
solutions can be found.
Well, here's the other thing that I don't get is that the friend who's got the child on the spectrum that says, well, I can't help him stomping, is just visiting the person who lives
That's
there.
true. Yeah.
So go home. After 9 o'clock, go home. Like, why do you have to be there anyway?
Yeah.
Like banging your drum going, I need accommodations for my child and you can get over it. And your husband, who cares if he has to go to work? Go home.
Yeah.
And stomp there, and you deal with your neighbor there.
Yeah.
If I, honestly, I go, what? She doesn't even live there. Go
Yeah.
home.
But you know what?
So-
It's interesting, Shan, because when you first read it, I was thinking to myself, we look at it kind of through different lenses because the child has autism, right? But if there wasn't a child there with autism, and if there were other kids and they were just running around stomping, and a lot of kids love stomping, a lot of kids will get super excited. Typically, developing kids will get super excited if they see something on TV and they want to imitate it and so on. What would we feel about the situation under those circumstances?
Right.
We'd say, oh no, and obviously, I'm sure a lot of people have this going on as well, where you have friends where the parenting style is very different than yours. Like, they can either let their child be very spoiled, or they can let their child treat their child with extreme severity and strictness. And you're like, whoa, to both of those, right?
Yes.
And so there's a little bit of that as well, which is like some parents just feel that it is okay to just let your kids go wild. And so from their perspective, I can understand that they'd be like, why is this neighbor bothering us? They're just kids, And so like
Yeah.
there has to be a compromise on both sides.
Yes, I'm laughing because I'm going to tell this brief story that years ago, it was my birthday, and with a group of friends, we went out to a low-key restaurant, very low-key restaurant. And we said, everybody bring their kids, because everybody had little kids. And everyone that was there, kind of tended to their own kids. But, there was one mom who just doesn't believe in that. She's like, the collective universe will parent my children when we are in public. I'm on a break, is how she parented. And at one point, she had a little one that was like 3 that she was just letting go through the entire restaurant. He was taking food off. This is not a child on the spectrum, you guys, but he was taking food off of other people's plates. And like the waiter came up and said, ma'am, we need for you to police your child. And she was like, oh, he's fine. Then he went into the kitchen and got a knife. He came back with a knife and was sticking the knife in the back of my husband's chair when someone stopped him. And I finally said, parent your damn child.
Oh my God.
I was like, do something. And she was not happy with me. She was like, I just don't, and that we didn't go to dinner with them a lot more. Now the child is older. I'm sure we could, but had a knife from the kitchen.
Yeah.
That is to me, that's the definition of you've abdicated parenting and have said, I'm not participating. And that was of course, that was the mom of a neurotypical child, which brings me right back to God only gives you what you can handle. And those of us who have been so blessed to have kids on the spectrum, it's because God knew that we could handle it, and she for sure could not.
Yeah.
All right. With a knife.
Right.
It's like, what on earth? What can you say? We all still laugh about it. Okay, from that hilarity, not really, to something incredibly serious that none of us really want to talk about. Somebody wrote in and said, support for adult autistic patient who is stable, living with parent at home. He is motivated to go to his work on Monday, Wednesday, Friday by bus, gets up, dresses, eats breakfast, gets the bus by himself, does household chores, hits all expectations in a timely manner, socializes well with adults, and enjoys cultural activities. The problem is, what happens when the parent passes? How can we make plans for him now? Right now, this particular person is 59 years old. In the case of losing his single parent who is 79 years old, what preparations can be made? How can he be prepared for the loss of his dad? He does not want to live by himself. So what can we do to prepare him for another situation? And this is everything, right? This is the thing that keeps us all up at night. This is the thing that is super hard. There is no pat, one answered, one and done. This is the hard stuff, but we're all facing this, whether we want to believe it or not.
Yeah. And I will say, honestly, that I remember one of the very, very first children that I treated back in like maybe the early 80s or something. I remember having a mom just, break down and cry and say, what will happen to him after I'm gone? And I've heard that question 200, 300 times from different parents. And it is a very, very concerning thought for many parents because, and even when the child is fully recovered and doing extremely well, there are certain things that we feel no one else can do as well as we can, right? No one else really understands. I was reading a blog from a mom over the weekend, which was just incredibly poignant and just touching. And it was, she had said something about the child was, and this is also an adult or a teen maybe at that point when she was writing this, and he was having a serious meltdown and, got through to the mom at work, and because all the caretakers couldn't figure out what's going on, and all he was saying was December and mom. And, finally mom gets on the phone and says, are you upset because it's December and there's no snow on the ground? So you think we're not going to be doing all the holiday stuff because there's no snow, right? And and he's like, yeah, that's what it is. And mom's like, no, I promise you we'll do all the holiday stuff anyway. And that was the end of his tantrum, right? So it's like, there are certain things that only parents can ever provide. And that's just that. And that's just that. And there's, there will be a difference, but it's not necessarily, don't think of it as just he will lose things. I think if you are able to, and this comes back to kind of it takes a village, right? If you are able to bring in the appropriate people into his life, and of course, no one will ever be willing to take as much responsibility as a parent, but certainly you can bring in lots of people who will take a chunk of the responsibility, maybe a smaller portion. And, my kids are typically developing and they're adults, but also for them, I have multiple people, right? I have, people who can jump in if they have legal issues, people who will help them manage their finances, people who will with their no worries with their technology and alarm clock. No, I'm just kidding. People who will help them in different ways with their medical issues, etc. And that is probably something that, as parents of children who have special needs, it's super important to do is to kind of gather a group of people who can play significant roles for your child, right? Whether it be decisions or it just be who can visit him. If you have like three people who can visit and take care of it, just have a conversation with him every week, then you have a team of people where he's not socially isolated and he's getting someone to converse with and someone who can help him and so on. So I think that's the number one thing. Of course, we all need to have trusts, special needs trusts. We need to have people who are in charge of the financial and the living situation for our children. But I think it just goes back to trying to find those folks that you can trust and who introduce to him so that he begins to be comfortable with them now. What do you think, Shannon?
I mean, I just totally agree. And I think I took your advice when Jem was little, and it was just something. Listen, there's so many things to look at, right? And I know a lot of people that go, okay, I'm going to go set up the trust and I'm going to do the money thing. And when our son was 3, we were like trying to figure out how to pay the rent. So there was no money to put in a trust then. But what we did do then was take your advice and say to people, we went to one couple that we felt, had circumstances in their life that were going to be conducive, that if they had to do the physically taking care of him, that we asked, would they be willing to do that? But we made sure that every other aspect of his life that we tended to pick couples, and we said, we're assigning you guys to be responsible for this. My brother-in-law is a lawyer and his wife is a nurse.
There you go.
So we said, you guys are in charge of if he has questions about whether to go to the doctor and if he has medical stuff. And I remember taking social psychology in college, and they talked about the whole Kitty Genovese theory of the world, and that Kitty Genovese was a woman who, tragic story, but we learned a lot from it. I don't even remember the details, but terrible circumstances that she was being chased. She was running for her life down a freeway. And most of her clothes had been pulled off, and she was yelling and screaming and saying, somebody help me, help me, help me. And no one did anything. Mm-hmm. And what we learned, they did all this research on it, and they learned that if you just say somebody help, no one's going to help. But that if you say to someone, I need you to fix it, they're going to be like, I don't know how to. But if you say, I need you to go get a hose, then that person goes, oh, I'm responsible for the hose, and they will go and do it. Yeah. So we segmented his entire life to the point where, Jim and I, it's very important that our son has a theater education. So we assigned 2 friends of mine. One of them has directed on Broadway, and we said, you're responsible. You're his theater godparents. If anything happens to us, you're responsible for taking him to see good theater and to get a cultural understanding of the world. So that the people who were responsible for his day-to-day life, if we had passed away when he was younger, or if he still needed support, they just had to take care of the day-to-day. But we appointed someone else to take care of the financial, and then we appointed someone else that would have nothing to do with Jem, but that would always check in and see, oh, did somebody get divorced? Did somebody die? I need to refill that spot with somebody else. Yeah. So that we created a net around Jem. Now, I will say that what I have learned in the last 6 years, as Jem went from being a teenager to now being an adult, and most of the people that we hung around with, their kids went into adulthood, and I watched the people who had kids. I'll tell you the soapbox that I'm on now is that even now when I'm talking to parents of 3-year-olds, I say to them, you're going to make room in your head right now that your child is eventually not going to live with you while you're living. And people go, what are you talking about? You're telling me that I'm going to have to put him in an institution? No, you're going to find a living situation for them. Might be that they go live with a couple that has 3 people on the spectrum. Might be that they go live with friends. Might be that they, go into assisted living. I mean, there's so many different choices, right? And more that people are inventing and building. But you have to be of the mindset, because I learned from listening to our parents who have older kids, they want to go, if we build it in from the time that they're young, then their siblings and their friends and their friends' friends, and they want to grow past living at home too.
For
They
sure.
really do. Like there
Yeah.
are some people that it's a comfort level, but they still would benefit from having some of that autonomy of living someplace else. And the thing that is crushing to me always is, and I can think of a group of parents that say to me, Shannon, I feel like I will be a failure if my child goes and lives someplace else.
Mm.
And I always say to them, no, the failure is if you fail to take care of this last thing because you refuse to look at it.
Yeah.
That if your child is living someplace else and you're still alive, you still have the ability to go and do things with your child and make sure that it really is the place for them to be in their forever home. But
Yep.
if you wait until you're gone and let somebody else do it, let's guess how well that's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love you made so many really, really good points there, Shannon. I mean,
But where did I miss? Because you always
no,
catch me
you
where I
didn't
miss.
miss. You didn't miss, and you're absolutely right in that it's super important, that the Katie Genovese thing that you were talking about is like the kind of diffusion of responsibility, dissemination of
Is that what it's
responsibility. So
called?
and it was this girl who was in New York in the 60s, and she was stabbed in an alley, and
that what happened?
38 people or 40 people observed it, and nobody did anything because they all assumed someone else would. And so that is very true. So you have to have people who are given a specific responsibility, and it's different from everybody else's. So you are responsible for his healthcare, you are responsible for his money, et cetera, et cetera. That is number one. That's like assigning jobs, and that's so important. The thing you talked about, I think that is so important for parents to understand, is this concept of placing the child or having the individual as an adult live somewhere else. And it's funny because when we're looking at schools, we do look at this school placements, right? You look at a hierarchy, which is the kind of most intrusive to least intrusive. So it's sort of like most, I guess, intrusive, or the most special ed, like pure special education class. And then there's all these levels, which goes up to regular ed. Right. But below regular ed is regular ed with an aid. And below that is regular ed, pull out. So you have certain cases with an aid. And then below that is just, special ed, but with one session in regular. And there's a gradient, right? And it all works towards independence. It all works towards independence. Everyone, all human beings have a desire for both social interaction and independence. And so now looking at autism, and there's such a wide spectrum. So it's going to be a different answer for each family. If you have a child who has become an adult and is very severe still, and I have several patients like that, the parents are incredible in that, like some of the parents you and I both know, they've set up, let's say, an art studio for the child so that the child has a location that they can go to and do something with assistance from others, but they can do it separate from their parents, because there's a little bit of a need for the child to do something on their own, have some sense of accomplishment on their own. And as you move up the spectrum and like become a little bit less severe, yes, of course, you might be like this individual where like they're already, or even more severe than this individual, like there are individuals who are, for instance, getting up and getting ready, but they can't go and get public transportation and go to a job. But at the same time, they can go to, let's say, and get a community bus or a special bus that is intended for them, and go to a social environment or a daycare center or someplace where they can actually do their stuff, right? And there's different levels, but it is so important for the individuals who are capable, they have some social capability, and who are able to live with support, to be given the opportunity to live independently with support. And I'll go beyond that, right? And there's so many levels, right? There are homes where there's 5, 6 individuals and multiple people taking care of them. There are places where there's only 3 individuals and one person taking care of them. There are setups where, the individual is living with roommates, but the caretaker is living downstairs in another apartment, so they're separated. There's situations where the individual is living alone and there's a caretaker who comes in and drops it. I mean, it's gradients of independence.
Yeah.
And the more you can encourage that while you are alive, and the more you can plan for that, the better. Because as you and I know, Shannon, despite the fact that autism has been growing crazy amounts over the past 40 years or so, and is not stopping, there's still not enough resources for adults. There's all the concentration is on the early interventions and children, and maybe a little bit for adolescents, but there's just not enough for adults. And so if you are a parent listening to this right now, and you are privileged or in a job or situation where you can somehow help produce more of these types of living spaces, also jobs. I will never forget, I met a gentleman on the East Coast. Where was it? I'm trying to think. I think it was in the DC area, where he has built and grown a series of car washes, which that's because his brother works at one, and now he has all the employees are special needs individuals.
Yeah.
And so if you are in a situation where you can produce an opportunity for special needs individuals to live in or work at, please do, because that is where they get to experience that sense of independence, independent accomplishment, and which gives them a sense of self-esteem and growth. And everybody needs that.
Absolutely. It's a lot to face. No one can face it. And like we said, there's no one size fits all stamp, like one and done.
Yeah.
But you need to start thinking of it, and you need to start thinking of it now. Whatever age your child is now. Because I have seen the difference in the parents who did face it and their child. There's one parent, it's a couple that they got divorced, and it was right about the time that he was being an adult. They arranged, first they sent him to a 2-week camp, then they sent him to an all summer camp, and then they saw how well he did. He flourished. And then now he's placed in a home where there are 3 gentlemen that live there, in addition to a couple that is the caretaker for the 3 gentlemen. He has autonomy. And mom and dad have their lives, but they have a very rich life with him, and they have a rich life as a family together. And I know when they are gone, that the rest of us are there to sort of fill in the gaps, but that he's going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And mom has said to me many times, she's like, this is the biggest blessing in my life. I could never have imagined it before, but I know he's going to be okay when I'm gone. That gorilla has been taken off of my chest.
So good. So good.
It's been so inspirational to me. And I just say to everybody, start now. All right, let's move on. Because we should always talk about food, right? Hello, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Thank you for always trying to help us. My son is 4+, nonverbal, regressed around 20 months, and attends ABA at CARD San Antonio, and saying hi to all our friends in San Antonio. From your previous advice about getting a stool test done to check if there is yeast overgrowth to rule out yeast as the reason for my son's no reason laughing spells, we got a comprehensive stool study ordered by a functional medicine doctor, and there was no yeast issues in the result, but some issues with malabsorption, for which a specific strain of probiotics, L. reuteri, that's a big one, with vitamin D has been prescribed. After a week of using them, he has diarrhea. Earlier, he had hard stools. Should we hold on to the probiotics or continue even with the diarrhea? P.S. He is still on the gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free diet with reduced sugars diet.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because, L. reuteri, which is mostly lactobacillus, right? A very good probiotic, is actually one of the things that is often prescribed when someone has diarrhea. So it's one of those things that should counteract the diarrhea. But what it's telling me is that the microflora in your child's gastrointestinal system or gut is not really balanced. And they're trying to balance it by giving you some probiotics. I would really go back to the physician who has prescribed this, explain to them that you are experiencing diarrhea. Diarrhea is not something to be ignored. You need to talk to them, tell them your diet, and let them guide you and advise you, because that's much better than my feedback here. You have someone who has actually assessed your child and has done a stool test and is very much aware of what's going on in your child's microbiome. And it's really important that you get this right. It's not an easy task. So follow their instructions to the T. It takes a while to put the right bacteria back into the gut.
Can I ask a question though of this parent? Can you, because you make a point of saying here that they're on the gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free diet, but I want you to look at your L-reuteri and see if it is milk derived. Because I am only aware of one company that does L-reuteri without it being containing milk.
Could be, yeah. And lactobacillus usually is dairy derived. So you should maybe take a look at that. That's a very good point. And also, I don't know what his dosage is right now. So it could be that it's just a high dosage. And if you reduce the physician reduces the dosage, then you'll be right at the right amount, which is not hard stools and not diarrhea. But have a conversation with the physician.
There you go. Hi, I want to ask Dr. Granpeesheh about my son who was diagnosed with autism at 31 months. We live in South Africa. My son never responded to his name. He would spin himself around. He lined up toys and he would play with them in strange ways. My son would be distracted by the smallest sounds and would hate weird textures on his hands. He would also hate to be hugged and only had 2 words by the age of 3. My son just turned 5 and now I'm starting to question his diagnosis. He has been in ABA therapy, speech, and OT for 2 years. Now at 5, he loves going to the playground and playing with other kids. My son always manages to find a friend. His speech is still delayed, but I can have a conversation with him and I feel he will soon catch up to his peers. My son has never had a meltdown. He loves playing with dough and sand now, doesn't seem to have sensitivity to sounds anymore, and loves hugging his mom and I. He is completely different now. I just don't understand it. He is in mainstream and his teachers say he is a pleasure to have in class and he's super confident when answering questions. Do you feel that he might have been misdiagnosed?
I love this question.
I do too. Yeah.
I hope that you will get to see this show so that I can respond to your question here, because no, I don't think he was misdiagnosed, but I think that it is entirely possible that he's losing his diagnosis. And so what you describe is the most joyful parts of my life is when I meet a young child below the age of 3 who is, not responding to his name, engaged in a lot of self-stimulatory behaviors like spinning himself around, lining up his toys, playing with his toys in kind of odd ways, being distracted by the smallest sounds, being very sensory sensitive to textures, hating being hugged, which is another sensory issue, of course, and having only 2 words by the age of 3. You've now hit on the majority of the symptoms that describe autism. So that's awesome. And I don't think there was a mistake at that point, because if you have 2 words by the age of 3 and you're doing a lot of this stuff, I can assume that there were other things too. For instance, the child might have been very much isolated in his own engagement with toys and not really connected very much to society and all of that. Now you did an incredible thing, which is you got him into ABA therapy, you got him into OT and speech for 2 years, and that is wonderful. I don't know what intensity you did, but perhaps you also did some other things. I'm not sure from a medical or dietary perspective. Whatever you did, it seemed to have worked. And he's now at the point where he's finding a friend. His speech is a little delayed, so I would not discontinue his speech and ABA. I would focus on getting his language up to par before you let go of that. But it's awesome that you can have a conversation. It's wonderful that he's interacting with his peers. He's getting there. And the fact that he's never had a meltdown, remember, challenging behaviors like meltdowns, tantrums, etc., are not part of the autism diagnosis. They're just a side effect of frustration. So whenever I have parents where, first of all, the child sounds like your child has been learning rapidly, right? So whenever a child learns rapidly, their frustration goes away because they learn how to communicate. They learn how to use words to communicate, so their frustration is less. And it sounds like you are both maybe very involved, engaged parents. And that always also helps the child be less frustrated, because as parents, we often kind of predict what our kids want. So we make sure they're not frustrated. And so great. So they hardly ever have meltdowns, if any. And their behavior, they don't exhibit challenging behavior, right? So what it sounds like to me is that he's grown tremendously. He's acquired a lot of skills, which is wonderful. I'm not sure he's finished. So what I recommend to you is to get an evaluation done, because a lot of times parents will, you'll see, like I've had cases where a parent will, I recently had this case where I had recommended a certain amount of hours of ABA and speech. And it wasn't even a lot of hours, honestly. It was about 10 hours, which is really for the highest functioning child who's about to kind of be out of the whole thing and doesn't really need a lot. And the child started to do really, really well very quickly. And the parent decided to drop it down to 2 hours. And I didn't want them to. And I'm trying to convince them to increase it again, because there's still, even though the child is very social, there's still a lot of problems with articulation with this particular child I'm talking about. And I want to fix that before I stop the intensive work. And I want to recommend to you that you do an evaluation, get an idea of what areas your child might still benefit from some intensive teaching, because that's all you're doing. You're doing ABA, you're doing speech, OT. These are luxuries in the sense that they're tutoring. You're giving your child the one-to-one opportunity to catch up. So figure out what other areas there might be, teach those things using the ABA, speech, and OT. And it sounds like you will get to a point where your child no longer has the symptoms of autism. And that's really important, is that they won't have the symptoms anymore. And remember, autism is diagnosed based on symptoms. So you may have a certain set of symptoms today, you won't have them 3 years later. And that is exactly what we define as recovered, or having lost the symptoms of autism. It doesn't mean they did not qualify for autism 3 years ago. It doesn't mean that there was a misdiagnosis. It simply means that the child has now learned and has learned how to overcome those delays, and is now functioning within the realm of typical children the same age. So I want to congratulate you, and good job. And it's time to celebrate.
Yes. And I love this question. We see this a lot in autism, that, I think it's just a lot in humanity too, that we go, oh, well, we were doing this thing and this happened, but you don't connect the two together. And I just want to lovingly say to this dad, if you had been sending your child to the gym for 2 years, you would expect to see something different about how they walked, how muscular they were,
Absolutely.
what they did.
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't go, oh my gosh, they just must be somebody who's sprouting muscles. You would connect it to the fact that you went to the gym for 2 years. You and mom have been making sure that he gets to his ABA appointments and making sure that he gets to his OT and get to his speech. Of course, you should be seeing progress, of course. And how great that you're seeing such progress. As Dr. Granpeesheh said, you're getting it done. But I do see parents all the time, Dr. Granpeesheh, and heaven knows I'm guilty in other areas. I wasn't that way with ABA, because when I saw that ABA was working, I just wanted as much as I could get. I wanted to understand it and make sure that I could do it when we were done. Which is, I'm going to jump ahead to a question that we had that I think came in on Facebook. But I do want to say, sometimes we have this mentality where something is working and we kind of discount it. And you shouldn't, just like if you went to the gym.
Yeah.
So we do have a parent who wrote in and said, what do goals look like for older kids? We stopped at 9 because I felt like I had a handle on it. And I think that a lot of people, my son stopped having ABA therapy intensively at 8, but I will tell you that obviously we still use the principles of ABA in our home on ourselves and on our child. And I have been incredibly lucky that even though we stopped intensive therapy, I continued to work with you and other people and pick your brains on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I would be a liar if I said that we just went, woo, we done and we had it all figured out. That's a lie.
So, there's, I think the focus changes a little bit after a certain age, just because there are skills that develop later in life, right? So whenever a child is pretty young, a lot of what we're working on is just mostly based on language. It's focused on teaching aspects of language, speech and language, and some play and a lot of social and so on. As the child starts to hit 8 and 9, you start to go into this whole world of very abstract concepts. And really what you start to focus on are what I consider to be the higher areas of the curriculum. So we're talking about a lot of cognition, a lot of executive functioning skills, and a lot of social skills. And so, social skills will vary. There'll be things like how to play with other children, how to interact in a group that versus a group you don't know, how to help someone whose feelings were hurt, how to understand. There's like all this, there's a lot that has to do with just social conversation and things that, our behavior changes a lot in different social settings. So that's the social area. But as we know, there's this area, there are two areas that tend to be a little bit weaker in a lot of our kids. And one of those is perspective taking, or what we call theory of mind. And this has to do with teaching the child how to see the world through the eyes of others. And it's a very, very difficult thing to teach that to, let's say, a 6-year-old, because even in typically developing kids, that's a task that's a skill that begins to develop around 5 and 6. So, it's not something that we usually teach our children unless they've mastered a lot of other language, because it's very difficult to teach it as an abstract concept. But once you start getting into it, there's miles you go with just that concept of perspective taking, because you're talking about teaching a child. I mean, perspective taking will affect everything. It affects how we feel, because another child might knock down your backpack and you will think that, oh, he did that on purpose, because you're not able to see things from his perspective. Whereas if you did, you'd realize your backpack was in the way and it was an accident. And so that's like one way it affects us. Another way that it affects us is we cannot understand other people's emotions. And once we start to understand other people's emotions, it also regulates our own behavior, because we realize how they are perceiving us. Understanding other people better helps us understand what they're trying to explain through nonverbal language, how they're inferring certain things, how they're facial expressions are expressing. So understanding theory of mind, or what we call social cognition, or the other person's perspective, helps a lot of other skills, right? Telling jokes, telling lies, all of these types of things, which are skills that are actually very important for 9 and 10-year-olds, are dependent on this whole area of the curriculum called cognition. Being able to understand your own thinking, be able to understand other people's thinking. And another area of the curriculum, which we rarely start teaching earlier than, let's say, age 8, is the executive functioning area, and that has a lot to do with planning. And as you can see right now, Shannon, with Gem, and the older we get, a lot of what we do now does not have an immediate consequence. It has a long-term consequence, right? I mean, you were talking about going to the gym. That's a really good one. It's not an activity that most people enjoy in and of itself, but people go to the gym because the long-term consequences, they feel better, they're healthier, they look better, whatever it is. And teaching our kids to be able to postpone or delay their reinforcers is a very, very important thing. And also, if the reinforcer is out here somewhere, what are the steps I have to take to get there? What are these steps to my goal? And making those steps, and taking, being able to inhibit distractions while you're on the steps towards your goal. And all of those types of things are called planning. And planning is a very advanced skill, and all of the things that go into teaching that take time, and they're not appropriate for younger kids. So a lot of our curriculum in the areas of executive functioning and all that came into place once some of our youngest children hit middle school, and middle school is so different from elementary school. And we were like, oh gosh, we now have to teach the child how to take notes so that he knows his homework is due in 4 days or in 3 days or next week or whatever it is. So a lot of things, it's just much more abstract. So the things that happen past age 8 and 9 are more in the abstract range if the child has really mastered all the earlier areas. And if they haven't mastered the earlier areas, then it doesn't matter what age they are, because we still have to go back and work on the basics, the stuff that we all need, which is language and being able to comprehend, listen, receive information, and communicate. So those are some of the things. The curriculum changes pretty significantly as we age, and maybe we'll do a show sometime, Shannon, where we just talk about the areas of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's funny. I love listening to you, Dr. Granpeesheh, because you just know so much. Because my head immediately went to having, just gone through those teen years with Gem. One of the things that we discovered was that there on Pinterest, there are just like all these lessons that are just life skill lessons that are just all the things that I don't know how we used to learn it before. I think we learned it because our grandmothers lived with us, and we just like picked all these things up. But even, when COVID hit, and Jem was 16 when COVID started, we just, there's a whole bunch of things that he wasn't getting that we knew that he was going to need. And there were life skill worksheets on Pinterest that were things like explaining, insurance to all levels of people, about why you have insurance, why you don't have it. That would never have occurred to me.
Yeah.
But there was one day when we sat down and talked to him about insurance and taxes. And it was and there was another day where we sat down and showed him how to address an envelope, because it never occurred to me.
So interesting.
That nobody's teaching that in school anymore. There are all these things that were going to be necessary for him to be an adult that hadn't occurred to me, in addition to all the things you're talking about.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, because my mind didn't even go to adults. My mind just went to 9.
Yeah.
And 9 to, let's say, 12, right?
Yeah,
because
you're right.
After that, there's, as you know, we have a ridiculous curriculum for our adults, which is massive. And you talked about some life skills. There's so many things. I mean, from like how do I, and it doesn't, and there's, of course, with adults, everything we have is like at multiple different levels. So it's an adult who's extremely high functioning, looking for a job, and what do they have to do to get a resume together and go and apply, and how do they practice for that, for the actual interview and all that. Or an adult who has just enrolled in college, and how do they deal with all that. Or an adult who has just learned how to get on a bus, and how are they going to go from one place to another. Or an adult who is, there's like, how do I prepare food? How do I take care of whatever it is? There's a million things. And it really always just goes back to, and you started the show with this, which is, what does that individual need?
Yep.
And if the individual is at a point where the more important things like safety and etc. are taken care of, then sure, we can focus on daily living. But if that isn't, then we have to focus on safety. And it's about each individual. And there's 1,000 things that are taught past 9.
Oh my gosh. So very many things. Anyway, I can't even believe it. We're out of time. Like,
Yeah.
I just feel like this hour flew by like it always does. I do want to thank you so much, Dr. Granpeesheh, for your brilliant mind and all of your work. It's just,
thank you so much, Shannon.
no, thank you. Honestly, it's just so overwhelming to me to think about all the lives that you have impacted and you continue to impact. That, now you're on TikTok, and if people want to write in their questions to TikTok, you're answering those questions on TikTok. And TikTok, not Tic Tac. That's an entirely different thing. But I want to thank you for being that beacon of hope and understanding and reassurance
Thank
for
you.
so many people for so long. And thank you for continuing to do that. We're going to have you back here next week, hopefully live. This has just been, you've had some other things going on. I do want to say that on tomorrow's show, are you ready for this? I think it's only the second time in the history of Autism Live, we're having Peter Farrig on.
Oh,
And
nice.
you know me, I love some Peter Farrig. So I'm real excited to have Peter Farrig with us. He was this first envoy that you sent to our home who changed our lives. And
That's
he was
awesome.
the first person ever who said to me, "Oh, Dr. Granpeesheh, she's my mentor, and she's the one who taught me all of this." And I was like, I don't know her. I know you, Peter. I don't know her. And he was
That's
like,
awesome.
wait till you meet her. And then when I did, I was like, oh, Peter was right about one more thing.
That's awesome.
So he's going to be with us tomorrow. And then on Thursday's show, we have a young man who has started a training program that's called Driving with Autism. And so we're excited for having him on.
Fabulous.
So that'll be really wonderful. So that plus much, much more, you guys. But we'll be back tomorrow live. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. And thank you to Dr. Granpeesheh.
Thanks, everyone. Take care,
Bye-bye
Shannon.
for now.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.